Hey there, Whitney. Are you ready to podcast?
Yes, let's do it. Let's kick it.
Okay, let's now get started with the podcast.
I have a big mug of hot tea. It loves to fly through the air.
Please don't fling your tea at me, dear friend Whitney. That would hurt my face. And now we start the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Critically Acclaimed, the podcast where highbrow and lowbrow collide! It's another explosive episode of Critically Acclaimed for you. We have a lot to cover this week. It is one heck of a podcast, and thank you for joining us. My name is William Bibbiani. I'm a film critic for the internet. Everybody calls me Bibbs.
Which one of our podcasts isn't one heck of a podcast, really?
Average Fest?
I suppose so. That one is one of a podcast.
Maybe the dumbest idea we ever had. Who are you?
My name is Witney Seibold. I am a critic for The World.
Oh.
And some other things very soon that I can't talk about yet. But you can call me whatever you like, actually.
I will call you Late for Dinner. Late for Dinner and I are going to be doing this podcast this week. We're going to be reviewing the new releases Rampage and BLUMHOUSE'S. When I was a kid, I kept hearing that joke. Call me whatever you want. Just don't call me Late for Dinner.
Don't call me Late for Dinner.
And for many, many years, an embarrassing number of years, I never understood it because I'm like, why would we? That's a stupid name.
Hey, Late for Dinner.
Yeah, I'm not going to call you that. It's a dumb name. And then I was just like, oh, because on the phone they would ring you up and say, hey,
you're late dinner
was half an hour ago. Yeah. And we're like, why didn't you call me earlier? And then they're just like, we're jerks.
Why didn't you call me earlier? You're supposed to remember, dummy.
No, I don't understand anyway, it was a weird premise always.
What are we covering this week?
We're going to be reviewing Rampage and BLUMHOUSE'S Truth or Dare, which is in the title.
That is the title of the film. File it under B for BLUMHOUSE'S.
Yeah, like Lee Daniels, the butler. That's officially part of the title. It's BLUMHOUSE'S Truth or Dare. We'll talk about why that is. We also have our big double feature. Again, all in the month of April. You picked the good movie, and we picked the bad movie that goes along with it, and you picked the absolutely incredible French musical, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
Yeah.
And I cannot wait to talk to you about it because I love that movie a lot. And we picked one of the worst musicals ever made to go along with it.
The Umbrellas of Cherbourg was picking at its scalp, picked off a little scab and threw it on the street, and that little scab is La La Land.
Oh,
that's kind of where we're at.
I'm going to argue when we.
You know what?
I'm just going to say this right now.
All right.
I'm going to argue when we get to talking about it because you just trolled real hard.
Yeah, no.
A lot of people love La La Land. Here's my thing with La La Land.
I did it on purpose.
The Umbrellas of Cherbourg is the great version of La La Land.
Yeah.
The double feature that we have for it is the really bad version of La La Land.
That's
and
true.
La La Land's right in the middle. There are things I like about it. There are things
I actually don't hate La La Land. I think it's decent, but I think it's certainly overrated. I don't think it should have gotten all those Oscar nominations.
Perhaps.
But
anyway.
But yeah, I troll because I can.
And there are two other topics we're going to talk about right now, one of which was fun and one of which is very, very sad. But let's get the fun one out of the way. Mm-hmm. This week on the movie Trivia Schmoedown, they had the epic Free-For-All 2. It was 48 competitors. These are film critics, internet personalities, people from all throughout the internet. They converged on Collider headquarters for a massive trivia competition. It ended up being, I think, 3.5, 4 hours.
It's about 4 hours long.
We're going to talk a little bit about that right now, and we're going to have some spoilers for that. So if you haven't watched it yet, skip ahead. There's a time code in the description of this episode.
You who are listening to this through the SK Plus network probably know what we're talking about, but it is an elimination tournament, for those of you who don't know, where 4 competitors are brought out, and the first one...
5.
First to get the... It's
5 competitors are brought out.
Five competitors. Five competitors. They ask 5 questions, and whoever gets the most wrong is eliminated.
Yeah, and then they just bring in a new one, fill out the roster of 5, and then they keep going until someone wins.
All 48 competitors are eliminated.
And you and I both did rather well, I feel.
You did well.
I did particularly well, but when you look at the stats, you actually lasted more rounds than most of the other competitors.
I was just
you
proud
came out
that
early. Which is a bit of a handicap.
I was, I think, 11th in line, 10th or 11th in line to be brought out. So
out of 48 again. So it's
I was proud that people were brought out and left while I was still on there. That's all I was really hoping for.
Yeah.
And I blew it on a question about Finding Nemo, so I don't feel so bad.
It was an odd question from Finding Nemo. I believe the question was, what did Nemo venture out to touch just before he got stolen by a human scuba diver? And the answer, I think there are two correct answers for that. One is the boat. The other is the butt. Because that's what they call it.
They're fish, and they don't know what a boat is.
I'm amazed they know what a boat is. Like, why would they know the human word for that? Like, why would they?
Why do they speak English? Come on, you're asking the wrong question here. Finding Nemo is a film I've seen once, and it was in theaters, so it was not a detail I quite remembered.
No, I saw it a bunch of times. I liked it. My favorite. A lot of people liked an answer you gave. I believe it was, what was Ron and Ginny Weasley's mother's first name in the Harry Potter movies? And your plucked out of your butt a guess was Beowulf.
Her name is Beowulf Weasley. I clearly didn't know the answer to that one. I've seen those movies too. I've seen them a bunch, and I like that character, but I didn't remember her first name. Just it wasn't in my brain. So why not Beowulf Weasley?
Anyway, I think you did great.
It's as good as any.
We were all we could see all the competitors couldn't fit in the studio for the Schmoedown Free-For-All. Like, there were too many of us. So they had like a live feed set up in like the rest of the Collider office, and we were all watching from another room. And I was there with like this huge crowd of people, like all the big names, like your Drew McQueenys and your Rachel Cushings. And everyone was watching you play, and everyone's just like, his handwriting is great. Everyone was really impressed.
I like that my penmanship is at least notable.
Well, they were impressed by your performance as well, but everyone's just like, everyone writes like crap except for Witney. This is great. I ended up playing 21 straight rounds.
Very nice.
Which
is the most, wasn't it?
That was the most. I broke the record set last year by Dan Merle. Actually, a couple people broke the original record. It was me and I think Ethan Irwin handily beat it. I think a couple people tied it.
Okay.
A lot of people did really, really.
Do you remember what the previous record was?
I think it was 11.
Okay.
So I handily beat that. And Ethan Irwin, I think, got 15. So that was also he was amazing. He was great too. But I ended up getting the MVP award, which was nice. Thank you. But the real thing is, because I lasted the most rounds,
even though you weren't technically the last man standing.
I wasn't technically the last. Well, no one was the last man standing. The last person standing was Brienne.
Well, Brienne,
who won?
Of course, Brienne.
Brienne kicked ass. By the way, I have no animosity about that whatsoever. I'm so happy she won because she's great. And if you watch her performance, she played like 4 or 5 rounds and missed one question. She was fantastic. And her performance was her introduction.
She came out as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
And killed a bunch of vampires. It was great. It was a great intro, and it made me really happy. So super stoked about that. She gets a number 1 title shot of her choice. And she could take that for singles. She could take that for teams. She could take that for Inner Geekdom or Star Wars if she wanted it. But I got a number 1 contender spot. Which means I don't get to like play like the person who has the belt or the team that has the belt, but I get to play, regardless of my ranking, the person who is next in line, and then if I win that match, then I get a title shot. I'm going to tell you this right now, audience. I'm not telling you what I'm doing with that. I'm not telling you what I'm doing with that.
Are you ruminating, or are you just not telling us?
I am totally ruminating, but there's a lot of factors at play. There's a lot of people in flux right now, like who has a contender spot, like right now, who I would like compete against isn't necessarily who's going to have it in a few weeks or in a month. So I'm keeping a little close to the vest. I've made some decisions. Maybe you and I, and our team, Critically Acclaimed, have a match coming up, but maybe you and I will take it. Maybe I'll take it for singles.
Maybe we'll see.
Maybe I'll do something really chaotic and strange.
We do have a match coming up.
We do,
like in a bit, but
in a couple of weeks. Superhero news.
Yeah, we have a match with superhero news coming up.
They recently made their debut. They handily won that match. I look forward to playing them. They're great. I know Sabina particularly well. She's wonderful, and she played really well at the free for all. So we have our work cut out for us. But I don't think we'll lose. We might win.
Fingers crossed. Knocking wood.
Wouldn't that be nice? This is the worst kayfabe ever, by the way. We're just sort of chit chatting. We want to win because it's been 8 months since we played, and we're actually like really eager. And I've been bugging Christian about getting us in there for a while, but he had all these other things he had to do. So.
Christian just picks up the stick and throws it and says, "Go away!" And we run after it and just bring it back. How about now, go away! Thank you, Christian.
Anyway, so the free for all is a lot of fun. If you either watched it and so you didn't mind listening to the spoilers, or you didn't care enough not to skip this segment of the podcast, in which case, watch the Schmoedown. It's a lot of fun. I'm having fun doing it.
You can fast forward to our bits. And sadly, I didn't last long enough that we could go head to head.
Weren't you like the round in front of me?
I was the round in front of you.
Literally, you left and that gave me a spot.
I think so. So that
would have been fun.
We didn't get to play head to head.
We need you to play singles.
I would love to play singles. I would love to play with...
Who would you want to play? Granted, like the top tier people, you're not going to get to because you just started.
Yeah.
But like people who are relatively new, or maybe people who don't have the greatest track record at the moment.
Yeah, it's like I would love to go head to head with Sam Levine, but he is untouchable at this point.
He's the champ, so you'd have to work your way up to that. I would love to see you play Ethan Irwin.
Okay.
Because he, I think, has only played one game in singles. And then, of course, he did fantastically at the free-for-all.
Yeah.
But, he's really talented, and you're really talented, and I think that'd be a super exciting match.
Well, fingers crossed.
Wouldn't that be fun? So
I can take anybody. Or lose. Who knows?
If anyone's listening who knows what Christian Harloff's Twitter is, let's see if we can get that started.
Wait a minute. We know Christian Harloff's Twitter.
I know, but he's not listening to us.
He doesn't listen to us.
Gotta get the fans riled up.
Who do you
want to see? I'm gonna say this right now. Who do you want to see Witney Seibold play in a singles debut on the movie Trivia Schmoedown? Tweet to Christian Harloff with a hashtag Schmoedown.
Who's the anti-me?
Yeah,
the anti-Whitney.
Yeah. and someone
Nego-wit.
Someone nice. Your persona is very mean.
I guess so.
Anyway. So that's the fun stuff. Unfortunately, we have really bad news this week. And we're not just like the world, because a lot of bad things are happening all over.
You look outside and it's horrible, but in terms of film history, something really tragic happened just yesterday.
Just yesterday.
Yesterday, as we record this.
The incredibly brilliant filmmaker Milos Forman passed away, I believe, at the age of 86.
He's 86 years old. Now, he hadn't made a film for quite some time. He's actually been sick for quite some time.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what his last... Was it Goya's Ghost?
Goya's Ghost was his last movie.
Yeah, and that wasn't one of his best, but he was the filmmaker behind One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, one of only 3 films ever to win the top 5 Academy Awards. Picture, director, actor, actress, and screenplay. On top of that, it's also brilliant. He directed Amadeus, which got him his 2nd Academy Award for Best Director. Also a brilliant motion picture. He directed... In the 90s, he fell into this groove of doing like a whole bunch of strange biographical films about unusual people in American history, like Larry Flint and Andy Kaufman, People vs. Larry Flint and Man on the Moon.
Both of which written by the same screenwriters, Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski. So,
who also did Ed Wood, and I think they did that TV show, The People vs. People vs. O.J. Simpson.
Oh yeah, I think they did. They also did Big Eyes, that biography.
I love that movie.
I love Big Eyes,
but that's not a Milos Forman film.
But yeah, Milos Forman got his start in Czechoslovakia before it was the Czech Republic. Back in the 1960s, and he was part of the Czech New Wave that was going on at the time that was very, very critical of like the communist government. And if you would go on to Filmstruck, it's probably still on there, you can see one of his early films from 1967 or 68 called The Fireman's Ball.
I still haven't seen this one. I hear it's amazing.
The Fireman's Ball is bloody amazing. Like, you've seen Jacques Tati movies. It does have this kind of like observational humor. The camera is really far back, and it's a bunch of just elderly firemen trying to have a ball, trying to like commemorate a retiring member who's 86. There's a really great line of dialogue. He's 86. We should have given this honor to him when he was 85 instead of today when he's nearly dead. It's like... It's incredibly dry. It's really wry. There's scenes of them like trying to hang a banner, and a guy ends up dangling from a wall for like an extended period, and then the banner catches on fire. And during the ball, they try to have a beauty pageant, and just like the women come, just women, all of the women just sort of come out and say, you want to be part of the beauty pageant? Whatever. Nobody really cares. One woman takes her shirt off. She's like, okay, you get to present the award. But nobody's really excited about this. Everybody's really confused as to what's going on. The old man gets up to get his award too many times before he's supposed to. And then a fire breaks out.
Makes sense.
And they get in there, and they're all firemen.
Yeah, they have to deal with this.
All the firemen are here, and the barn is on fire over there. So they get in their fire truck, and it gets stuck in the snow. And they have to trudge their way through the snow to the fire, and all they can really do is watch the fire. And the man is watching his barn burn, the owner of the barn, and he says, I'm cold. Okay, let's just get closer to the fire. It's a lot of the government officials at the time thought that it was really critical of the communist regime, and it is indeed making fun of like the systems that we kind of stick ourselves into. Milos Forman denied it until the communist regime fell, and then he said, yeah, that's what it was.
Well, he moved to America, and apparently like he tried to move on some sort of director's like visa, and then the DGA was like kind of like anti-importing directors because American directors weren't all getting work, and then Mike Nichols like vouched for him and stood up for him, and then he became really one of the best working filmmakers in America. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a classic for a reason. If you haven't seen it, you should. It stars Jack Nicholson as a incarcerated criminal who realizes that prison sucks, but if I act like I'm crazy, they'll send me to a nice, cushy mental institution without like bars on the windows and stuff like that, and everything will be great. And at first it's like a vacation for him, and he's a total asshole, and then he realizes he overdid it because they're actually convinced he has mental problems, and then he's actually institutionalized, which, unlike jail, you don't just get out of that when your time is up. And he ends up stuck in a very different institution, and it becomes very, very tragic. It's a brilliant motion picture. The performances are uniformly amazing, and I think it holds up equally well today. Although it's a film I find, as you get older, your allegiances start changing a little bit, and you start realizing that the characters you thought were the villains are maybe not good people, but they're not as bad as all that. Or they're
actually doing something good here.
Or they think they are, at least.
Nurse Ratched becomes, like a more understandable, humane character the older you get.
Yeah.
You watch that film when you're 21, and it's all about Murphy.
Yeah.
Like Murphy's the rebel. He's going to buck the system. And Milos Forman liked to make films about people who try to like buck really oppressive systems.
Yeah.
Or just, he liked to film oppressive systems. And it eventually started to put heroes in there. Amadeus is a great example. Amadeus is
one of my favorite movies ever.
This bratty child who sort of bursts out into the music scene, which, as represented by Salieri, played by F. Murray Abraham, is a very stead, very mature, the royals are behind it, institution, whereas he is using nothing but talent to get through this, even though he's not behaving the way a composer ought to.
He's brash, he sleeps around, he's godless. Milos Forman does a clever little thing where he tries to get like because this was made in like 1984. He's trying to get it kind of compared in your head to punk rock. So like when Mozart gets like a new wig, because everyone was wearing powdered wigs at the time, he gets his in hot pink.
And it's spiky,
Yeah, like just and it sounds like the kind of thing that would be ridiculous, but when you're watching it makes you totally buy into the reality of it.
It's not like Listomania. That's
it's or like Moulin Rouge, where like one of the reasons why in Moulin Rouge all of those songs are old, or are songs that even though it takes place like 100 years ago, was they needed to prove that this songwriter was a genius. So if it's a song was a hit, he's ahead of his time, and that's how it sells. So Milos Forman did that, but subtly and more effectively.
Well, also, it's Mozart. Just use Mozart. You're good.
Amadeus is not the first film I saw in a theater, but it's the first film I remember seeing in a theater. Like my mother told me the first film she actually took me to was Staying Alive, the sequel to Saturday Night Fever, which has a horrible reputation. And I watched it finally as an adult, and I'm like, you know what? It's not that bad. It's not as good as Saturday Night Fever, but it's not that bad.
I think it's just not as good as Saturday Night Fever, and that's its biggest sin.
But Amadeus is an incredible production, and even though I didn't pick up on all the nuances, Milos Forman filmed that sucker like a summer blockbuster. All of the performances of the operas are astounding and overwhelming and beautiful and exciting. And even as a 2-year-old, I was so enraptured by it that I insisted that we stay and watch it again immediately, and we did.
Oh, okay.
However, as I get older, I realize there's a lot going on in that movie. And you talk about just systems. There's also just the system that we impose upon art, in which people who sort of buck trends are sort of looked down upon by people who are merely just good at their jobs. It's a tragic tale of mediocrity. And he calls himself the patron saint of the mediocre, I think.
Salieri.
Yeah. And how, like, he kind of, but not really, got his revenge on Mozart, but not really. Like, it's interesting how it plays out. Anyway, it's a brilliant motion picture. It plays really fast and loose with history, and you should know that going in.
So that's not what happened to Salieri.
Salieri didn't do any of that, but as a story, it's amazing. But what have we already talked about it? What's your favorite Milos Forman movie?
Well, I wanted to recommend The Fireman's Ball. I also want to bring up one that actually isn't mentioned too often, and that's Valmont. This was one of those weird, like, Summer of Deep Impact and Armageddon phenomena where there were two major studio adaptations of Laclau's Dangerous Liaisons,
which is a classic novel about they're French. They're French aristocrats who decide to seduce someone based on a bet. Seduce someone who's pure because they have no morals, and they're going to try to prove that she has no morals. And it's really very acidic. They remade it as Cruel Intentions with Ryan Phillippe and Reese Witherspoon. And you know what? That one's kind of trashy fun, but like
it's definitely trashy.
Dangerous Liaisons and Valmont is where it's all at.
I have not seen Dangerous Liaisons, Stephen Frears' version, but I have seen Milos Forman's version, which is just called Valmont, and that one is pretty brilliant about sort of exploring the moral emptiness of the main character and sort of the small bits of regret that he has along the way. In all versions of this story, the person they're supposed to be seducing is not just innocent, but is also very young. And in Stephen Frears and in Cruel Intentions, they kind of age them up a little bit so it's less creepy. Milos Forman doesn't bother. He cast a young Fairuza Balk in that role just to make it extra scary. And that he's really willing to confront the audience with the moral grossness of everything that's happening in that movie makes it much better. Because that's kind of what the book was getting at. You know, rather than sort of shy away from the hard stuff, he really just goes full bore. I really like Valmont. I like Man on the Moon. I like The People versus Larry Flint. I'm forgetting a major one, I know.
I'm sorry. Goya's Ghost was not his last film. He did a film called A Walk Worthwhile, which I didn't see.
No, I haven't seen that one either.
Man on the Moon, People versus Larry Flint, Ragtime. We didn't talk about Ragtime or Hair.
Oh, that's right. Hair. Hair is the one I'm missing. Well. He did the film version of Hair, which is okay. I think he did well with sort of speaking of breaking out of systems, that's just all about the hippies exploding and the system eventually kind of swallowing them up.
Yeah. Anyway, Milos Forman is a filmmaker who hasn't had a really prominent motion picture even before he died for at least 15 years. So I think a lot of younger audiences might not be aware of how vital his filmmaking was, not just to the industry, but just alive. Even if he was making what could have been just a regular biopic, again, People vs. Larry Flint and Man on the Moon are very vibrant, funny,
energetic movies,
motion pictures. They are really entertaining films, even though they seem like Oscar bait. So I highly recommend, if you haven't seen the filmography of Milos Forman, I would start with Amadeus. I think it's really a really good entryway. It's exciting. It's huge. If you don't love classical music, you will by the end. And then from there, I would consider One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
I would start with Cuckoo's Nest.
You would start with Cuckoo's Nest?
I mean, that's just... I think it's an important American film. But
it is, but I think it's the sort of film where it's actually
it's a little too dour.
It's a little dour, and I want people to, I find when I recommend where to start with someone's filmography, I want to get them stoked. Yeah. If I can. Some people just have depressing filmographies, but, Milos Forman did a lot of fun ones. So I would start with Amadeus, because I think you're going to get that, serious dramatic portent, and there's all this really amazing fun stuff. And then from there, just play. Everything's awesome. You're not gonna, you'll be fine. So anyway, rest in peace, Milos Forman. You were really important to me. And a lot of people have been really saying really lovely things about him.
A lot of really wonderful wonderful contributions to cinema.
All right.
We can move on.
We're going to move on. We're going to move on to the new releases. Wonderful contributions to cinema? Perhaps not. But we're going to talk about them anyway. What do you want to start with? Blumhouse's Truth or Dare or Rampage?
Let's start with Blumhouse's Truth or Dare.
Oh.
Okay. Now, I believe it is called Blumhouse's Truth or Dare to distinguish it from the many, many other films that are also called Truth or Dare.
A lot. Madonna made a film called Truth or Dare. It's a documentary about her Truth or Dare tour.
I saw a really, really crappy horror movie called Truth or Dare: A Deadly Game.
Oh, I get it.
Which was a straight-to-video piece of crap from like the late 80s.
I went home and I just IMDb this. There's a lot of straight-to-video Truth or Dare type movies.
Like
so
action and horror and erotic thrillers.
So I get it, and again, I haven't heard any interviews about this, but I totally get it because you want Truth or Dare as a title because everyone knows Truth or Dare. It's a game a lot of people play, or at least they know about. Or have played once, and turning that into a horror movie makes sense. Like, if you think about it, you're taking something, a lot of horror movies about taking something relatively benign and then tweaking it so that it's scary. Now, the way Truth or Dare is played, just in case anyone doesn't get it, but just so we're on the same page.
We know how Truth or Dare is played.
You're at a party. Tell us if there's a bunch of people. And often when you're intoxicated, but not necessarily, you go around the room and you say truth or dare. And some person says truth, they have to tell the truth, even if it's embarrassing or shameful. And if they say a dare, they have to do the dare. I think there's an unwritten rule that you can't do anything like violent or horrible. But like,
I dare you to cut off a pinky, but yeah,
like that's way too extreme. But like, often it ends up like, okay, I want you to give that guy a lap dance, and the guy, and it happens in the movie. Hey, dude, give that guy a lap dance, and he's just like, oh man, but he does it anyway, and boom, there you go.
Bob's your uncle. This film is not as good as Would You Rather.
Which is also a party game, and that's a fun little movie. I like that movie.
Yeah,
it's as a low budget movie about would you rather, and both your options are really shitty and horrible and dangerous.
Like you could die, but maybe not.
And that one actually has a rather clever commentary because the reason people are playing that isn't some supernatural bullshit. It's because they have a real serious problem, and a billionaire is giving them a free pass.
Yeah.
So like, would you rather blow off your hand with a quarter stick of dynamite, or would you rather do this other thing? And he's offering you so much money that the option is, well, maybe. Shit, I don't know.
Can I have it be the hand I don't write with?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Truth or Dare, however, has the supernatural bullshit you referred to earlier. A bunch of boring white college kids.
Mostly white
college kids. Go on a vacation to Mexico, and they get drunk, and we get their characters established pretty on. Our heroine is kind of the goody-goody. In fact, she is skipping out on Habitat for Humanity so she can go on this spring break.
She didn't want to, but
she was inducted by her friends.
Her best friend, unsubscribed her from Habitat to Humanity. Like, I told them you were sick, so you're not going anyway, so you might as well come with us. And she's like, what? Humanity needed habitat.
Well, they do stage it alluringly. They say, well, we were going to go with you for 1 week, but we would rather have spring break. So over the summer, we will go with you for 2 weeks.
Yeah, all of us.
All of us will go for 2 weeks. And the one boyfriend says, I didn't agree to that. Well, you did now, boyfriend.
Yeah, it's a moral compromise. And honestly, as the closest thing the movie has to a theme is the idea of moral compromise. So they go to Mexico, and they meet a strange hunky guy. The strange hunky guy says, hey, I know. Let's go to the abandoned, probably haunted, dilapidated church out here in the middle of nowhere.
That's behind a barbed wire fence, and it's way out in the boonies.
Yeah.
There's a hilarious scene of these kids in their party shoes trying to hike through a trail holding their phones as flashlights.
Yeah.
They're completely out of place.
And once they get to the mysterious mystery place of mystery, the guy says, I know, let's play Truth or Dare. That's not contrived at all, is it? And the kids are like, no, that's not contrived. So they all sit in a circle and they all play Truth or Dare. And then when it's the dude's turns, and he's just like, ha-ha! I fooled you. For I have just tricked you into playing a Truth or Dare game for realsies! For magical realsies! And now you have to play a supernatural demon named...
Bagul?
No, it's not Bagul. What was it? Zaxel? Caxel?
Zaxxon?
It's some nonsense.
Cockamamie.
The Truth or Dare game is haunted by a demon.
The game... wait. Stop.
That's the plot.
Stop. The Truth or Dare game... haunted by a demon.
Sure is.
And it manifests itself in the people around you. And a person will show up in front of you and their face will be all distorted. Their eyes will be red and their smile will be like stretched into this rictus. Or in the words of the protagonist,
in a terrified tone,
it looks like some kind of messed up Snapchat filter.
Oh my god! You just managed to find a way to make that not scary at all. That's incredible.
So, Snapchat filter, the demon, comes at you and says...
We'll just call him Snappy.
Snappy comes at you and says, truth or dare. And if you refuse to play, you just die.
Some bullshit Final Destination thing happens and you die.
Snappy is in league with Final Destination.
They have
a deal. Yeah.
Well, they have a similar dynamic. In the Final Destination movies, a bunch of people cheat death because someone has...
a psychic vision.
A psychic vision of something bad that's going to happen and they manage to save some lives. But turns out death has a plan and now all of those people are going to die in order. The order they were going to die. And death manipulates everything around them into this weird Rube Goldberg contraption.
These bizarre accidents.
And honestly, even the worst Final Destination movie, 4, sorry, is still really fun because all of the death scenes are really inventive. In Truth or Dare, there's a lot of possibilities here to do something kind of clever, to force people to do something, to force people to reveal something that is really dangerous for them or really will destroy their lives. And instead, the movie does boring stuff.
Yeah, well...
really,
there's a moment where they say, well, this is easy. All we have to do is pick truth. Yeah. And that could turn into a scene where all of the surviving cast members are just sort of sitting around in a room telling things about one another and hating each other more and more, but they can't leave the room.
So it's no exit.
Yeah, it would be like no exit. It would be like the exterminating angel all of a sudden. It's just, I hate you, but I have to stay, otherwise we're going to die. And eventually somebody just leaves because they just hate the other people so much. That'd be a good film.
It's very indie, but yeah, I'd love to see that movie. That sounds
whatever.
good.
It's Blumhouse. It'd be cheap to make. Instead, they have, it has to be truth, dare. Like, you have to do a dare at some point.
Yeah, if anyone picks if there are 2 truths are picked in a row, you have to go dare.
Yeah. No matter what order you're going in.
Here's one of the biggest problems with this movie. The idea for Truth or Dare as a horror movie, turning Truth or Dare into a horror movie, there's something to that. It's not this, but there's something to that. The problem is they picked plot over metaphor.
Yeah.
And when it comes to a horror movie, that's death. Because
we don't care about the mechanics.
Horror movies work when they're just trying to be scary, whether it's fun scary or really genuinely sheets over your head, not being able to sleep scary. They work because they hit you on some sort of primal level. Jaws works, on some level it works because of the whole capitalist thing about will we shut down the beaches. That's the plot and that works. But Jaws is scary because there's a whole infinite void of water out there and it's full of monsters. And a part of us subconsciously knows that. And Jaws plays off of that by showing you the monster. Makes sense. Truth or Dare, Truth or Dare is a game about humiliation and shame and doing things you're not comfortable with. There's a lot of fodder in there for horror, but instead of focusing on all of these natural human anxieties that could be totally ripped asunder... They focus on why does it make sense that Truth or Dare would be haunted and what are the rules? And I do not care. Just say it's a magical game of Truth or Dare. There was a game of Truth or Dare that went awry, destroyed this whole church. This isn't even what happened, by the way. I'm not revealing the backstory. There was a magical game of Truth or Dare because a long time ago there was a Truth or Dare game that went horribly wrong and you did it in the same place and now you're stuck playing it. I don't care that the explanation is stupid. I just want to see the game.
And the dares are kind of ironic, kind of like fittingly poetic for it. Like one of the characters is an alcoholic and her dare is she has to do something very dangerous that
while drinking.
That an alcoholic should not be doing. And that scene was pretty tense, I guess.
Yeah, it was contrived what she actually had to do, but it was reasonably well handled as an entertainment sequence.
Then as truths come out about the way certain people feel about other people, then the
secrets we've been keeping from each other.
So as those secrets are revealed, the dares get to be sort of ironic and in light of those truths.
But everyone's plots are really straightforward and simple, so there's never really a truth that makes you go, oh my god. It's always just like, oh, you never told her that. Well, that's going to be a shitty conversation.
And the best friend character gets like dumped on time and time again.
Marky,
she just gets the short end of the stick in every single scene.
She's not the protagonist, but she has more going on than the protagonist. We find out her father committed suicide, and that's actually really messed her up. It wasn't that long ago either. So she's still like really messed up from that. She's in a long-term relationship with the guy, but she can't stop cheating on him like every time she drinks. So she has to bring her best friend along with her to keep an eye on her
from cheating.
Like she's got a lot going on, and even though she doesn't always do things that speak well of her, she's in college, she's young, she's making mistakes, and she's in pain, and I get her. The protagonist I don't get. A lot of the decisions that she makes over the course of the film, especially the end of the movie, which I won't ruin because it's the closest thing it has to like a fun switcheroo.
Has a fun twisty Rooney.
It's weirdly cynical. In a way that actually makes me hate all of these characters more than I did before. And I don't even mind that, because this isn't The Exorcist. This is a popcorn PG-13 slumber party horror movie, and you only need to make those so intricate. They don't need to fall together all that well. They just need to be kind of fun and entertaining. So it doesn't really matter if I want the characters to die like I do in like a bad Friday the 13th movie. I don't want to dislike them so much that I'm mad at you for showing me their story. And that's what Truth or Dare does. I don't like most of these characters. They're really shitty.
They're all really terrible characters, and the film doesn't really know that. The really obnoxious jerk character that was introduced early on, the one that they didn't want at the Truth or Dare game. Ron. I like him more than any of the other characters.
At least he's honest.
He was funny, he was straightforward, he was honest, he had a lot of energy and character.
He was an asshole, but at least he was a young party asshole.
Yeah.
He was a party dude.
A young party dude asshole can outgrow that, and I saw that for Ron. Ron could have survived.
The other thing with... Sorry, go ahead.
In addition, you talked about how the mechanics overtake it, and... Not only do they spend a lot of time sort of explaining the rules and how it came to be and how they have to undo it and all this big quest that they have to go on, but it's all based on sort of internet searches, and they keep offering helpful pieces of advice in dialogue, like, oh, well, did you do a reverse search?
Hold on. Did you search it on Google? I'm going to search it on Google.
Yeah, let me search it on Google. Like,
no one in the audience cares.
And it turns out like they have to track somebody down, and they just look them up online and just go to their meeting. So they go to their Facebook page as if that's like this really secret to finding a human being.
There's someone. Hold on, I really want to set the stage on this. There's someone out there who is also playing the game. It's you got to find the person who knows what's going on, so they can give you the exposition, and you can try it. It's in every horror movie.
The Vincent D'Onofrio role.
Yeah, often the Vincent D'Onofrio role. In screenwriting terms, this character is often called the half man or half woman, because they have experience with the horrifying thing the new characters only just discovered. And we see not only can they provide valuable exposition, but it's hurt them in
consequences,
some way. And so you see how their lives have been
deteriorated.
Ruined. So it's a function that's in almost every horror movie. So they need to find this person, and this person, because of all the dares they've had to do, is now like wanted for murder and shit. And they just like, oh, she's still on Facebook, so we're gonna send her a thing on Facebook. Wait. Start a new account.
That way she won't. That way no one will be able to find us.
So they start a new account and they send her this horrible, threatening thing. And then right after they create the new account and hit send, someone has to do their dare, and there's a horrible sequence. And then as soon as that dare is over, the protagonist gets a message on her phone from that Facebook Messenger, and I'm like, okay, hold on. You can't use social media this much in the movie and not know how social media works. We just saw them create that account. She has not added that account to her phone yet. She has not put the password for that on there. She's not going to get that alert on her phone. That is some stupid bullshit. You can't make it important and then pretend it doesn't matter.
Okay, so this is yet another case of an older person trying to write hip.
Well, presumably.
Or
a young
That's
person
what it sounds
thinking
like.
It doesn't matter.
Right. The young people don't behave like young people. They don't behave like humans. They just... It's yet another classical case of horror movie characters behaving like chattel to be slaughtered. They just do the dumbest possible thing so they can keep the plot going.
And that can be entertaining, but not here for a variety of reasons.
No, if things were splashier or maybe more cynical or maybe just more gory, whatever
fun.
It was, more sensational.
Yeah, sensational.
It would have been fun to watch. But yeah, these people are just really, really, really quite horrible. And
really, really quite bad.
also, these are college kids who, it's established early on, they're about to graduate. They're on their way to adulthood.
Yeah.
They know the world, presumably, and they're behaving like high school kids. And I'm wondering if, Truth or Dare is more of like a junior high school type game.
Yeah. Early parties, you only just discovered alcohol and you feel like you're being young and naughty.
Yeah, the real Truth or Dare games, like the naughtiest thing you can do is kiss another person.
Often.
And, when you're in college, it's like these people are already getting drunk and getting laid. They have no use for Truth or Dare anymore.
Well, they do at least pay lip service to that. Like, isn't that kind of a kid's game? And the dude's just like, well, it's the plot. And they're like, well, okay. Like, it's really I'm arbitrary, everything that happens.
I'm wondering if there was a version of this script where the characters were all like 13 and there wasn't drinking and sex. It was just the death. And somebody said at the last moment, we can't have this movie where a bunch of kids die, so let's age them up, but let's not change the script too much so they don't know how to use social media and they're still communicating the way junior high school kids might communicate.
Here's how I think this happened. I see what you mean, but I will bet you $100 that here's why the movie exists. Someone pitched to someone, whether it was originally Blumhouse or someone else, hey, you know what we should do? Truth or Dare, the horror movie. And someone said, oh, that's a good idea. How does that work? No idea. I don't give a shit. Have a bunch of attractive 20-somethings die and I'm good. Great. And then they just did their thing and it just turned out real bad. Now, I talked to some people who had a decent enough time watching this movie as kind of like a bad movie. And I can totally get that, but there are better bad movies. Like, you want to watch a terrible fucking movie about social media supernatural horror that is actually
Friend Request.
Friend Request is one of the best bad horror movies in a while.
Friend Request is a big ball of suck.
But it's a very entertaining ball of suck, and I'm actually like, I would watch that again more readily than I would watch Blumhouse's Truth or Dare.
I'd rather not split hairs. I think they're both pretty bad, and I'd advise you to see neither.
Okay.
Blumhouse's Truth or Dare is really quite dumb. We saw it with a really excitable audience, so a lot of people were jumping and screaming, and that always makes the film more fun, but it doesn't make it any better.
Well, you got to realize that particular experience, though wonderful, and I think we should preserve that, it doesn't last, and most of the time people are going to see Blumhouse's Truth or Dare from after a couple of weekends from now. It's going to be on home video, might be at a party setting, might be at a group of friends, but you're just going to see it at home alone and without random strangers behind you occasionally going at moments that didn't surprise you, so that their surprise surprised you, and that makes the movie seem more entertaining. Once you remove that, you're left with a pretty bad horror movie, and not see any of the Final Destination movies. Pick one at random, even the bad one is still way better than this. So that's my advice to you. I think it's interesting this weekend. This weekend we had a movie that's the bad kind of stupid, and a movie that's the good kind of stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Because Rampage is the good kind of stupid.
Rampage is based on an arcade cabinet game from that was invented in 1986. That's a Midway game. And I loved it.
I played it too. It was neat.
You played as a monster climbing up and down buildings, and you just punched stuff and destroyed buildings. And you got more points the more you punched and destroyed. And you could grab people out of windows and eat them.
And that would give you more power.
And when you lost energy, you shrank down to a little person, and then you were naked, and you got to sidle off the screen. But if you were playing with a peer, they could pick you up and eat you.
That's also a thing that could happen, and if the whole point was to compete to see who could wreak the most havoc on the screen.
You get to eat people, is my point.
Yeah, I know, it's fun.
You get to eat people.
And it consisted of, you had three monsters. You had a King Kong analog named George. You had a Godzilla analog named Lizzie. And you had a giant wolf man.
You're still doing that, are you?
And people like it when I do it. We talked about the Rampage being turned into a movie years ago.
When it was first announced.
Yeah, I'm still surprised that of all the the Dwayne Johnson projects that people tease all the years, that they made Rampage. That's the one
Rampage was the one that came
had
through.
the momentum. But I was always really weirded out because a giant wolf isn't really a thing.
It is. Yes, it is. It's in Rampage.
Well, it's not. Well, in the game, it's in Rampage.
Yeah.
In the movie, they change quite a bit. But who gives a shit? Because the game doesn't really have a plot. It's just three monsters breaking a city.
They changed the canon. My God. No, in the game, they actually give like one sentence explanations for each of the monsters. And George, the gorilla, was a man who had like a tainted vitamin. And turned him into a gorilla.
That's how little they cared.
A woman went swimming in a radioactive lake that turned her into a giant lizard.
That one I almost buy.
And a man...
radioactive lake, I buy that.
Radioactive lake. And
that's a reason to turn to a monster.
Another man had a mysterious food additive.
That turned him into a giant werewolf.
That was going to be recalled, and it turned him into a giant wolf man.
All right. So, in the movie, that's not the origin.
In a movie, there's monster gas in canisters in space.
Okay, I love the opening of Rampage. Like, when you were going to open... First off, let's just set the tone right now. This is the biggest and most expensive Sci-Fi Channel original movie ever, and I'm fine with that. That's great.
Well, it also works.
Yeah.
You know, the dumb sense of humor in the Sharknado movies is mean-spirited and clunky.
Yeah, this is really
it's actually...
earnest.
Yeah, it's really... fun and bright and accessible, and that makes it better.
So it opens with this incredible, like, well-filmed but fundamentally stupid sequence where this
Marley Shelton.
I was trying to remember who it was. It was Marley Shelton. She, scientist on a space station. They're doing genetic experiments in space, and we go into
because why not?
I don't know, the outside of laws that say they can't. And we go inside the space station, and everyone's dead. There's like severed hands and shit floating around in space. Things are on fire. And Marley Shelton is like trying to get to the escape pod. And some evil, sinister corporation voice says, "We're not going to open the door to the escape pod until you bring back the samples." And she's like, "But there's a giant mutated rat out there killing everybody." And they're just like, "Better hurry up then." So she's trying to outrun this giant rat. First scene in the movie. Trying to outrun this giant rat on a space station and bring in all of these samples. It all ends real bad, and the samples end up cracking up and like flying all into America. They land next to a wolf. They land next to a crocodile or alligator.
Alligator.
I was getting confused. And they land next to an albino ape at a...
It's a gorilla.
It's an albino gorilla at an animal sanctuary run by Dwayne Johnson.
In fact, it's the San Diego Animal Sanctuary.
Is it San Diego?
It's a real animal sanctuary.
Okay, I didn't know I couldn't tell what state it was. Okay. So, all of the animals start growing at an enormous rate and getting more aggressive, and they start getting weird superpowers.
Well, except in the case of George, but the other two, start
getting, like the wolf can fly as well, and it has spines.
Yeah, it has like porcupine spines, and it's explained that it's essentially just monster gas. These canisters, you breathe it in, like just one huff of it, and you turn into a giant monster,
a giant aggressive killer monster. I don't know why we need that gas. Seems like a bit of.
Here's the thing: in all of the dumb science fiction and action movies I've seen over my years, and I've seen a lot, there is this constant need for the military to develop monsters for weaponized use. They always talk
super soldiers,
or super soldiers.
Same
thing. Potato. Whether it's like a giant intelligent shark or carnivorous hamsters that can run 100 miles an hour.
Or big giant Tim Roths.
Is that what the military... Is this like the future of warfare? Is that what they're thinking? Like they're going to have all of these monsters that they'll somehow control and put them in uniforms and put them out on a battlefield? And they'll just wipe out humans?
You gotta wonder just what is
the actual practical application of having an uncontrollable monster?
Yeah, you want to be able to at least control it, right? Like, isn't that something that wouldn't be stupid?
It's like... It's like it was revealed in like Alien, the one concept that has sort of pervaded Alien is that the creature is a weapon. And that's something that actually leaked into Prometheus pretty powerfully, that these monsters are being made in order to wipe out a civilization. And because, they need to kill you to reproduce, but they also just kill you. And it seems to me like if you're just going to wipe out a population, that would be a pretty good way to do it. But if you need it in sort of like an organized combat situation, there's no, the military has no need for a 30-foot wolf with porcupine spines.
And even if your plan is to just send that out into enemy territory and a monster will kill all the enemy, you still have a giant monster out there. You gotta do something. You can't just let it roam around. Like, you got to do something with that monster.
It's that great bit in The Simpsons. Oh, well, these bugs are going everywhere. Well, we'll just let loose the rats, and the rats will eat all the bugs. Well, what about the rats? Well, then we let a bunch of cats out. What about the cats? What about the pandas? Well, luckily in the winter, the pandas freeze, so we're safe.
And Rampage gets away with that, though, because we find out that the evil corporation behind the creation of this chemical is run by morons.
It's run by Malin Ackerman and Donald Trump Jr.
A guy who's clearly playing Donald Trump Jr. Like, he looks like every photograph you've ever seen of Donald Trump Jr.
And
it's hilarious.
The reason the movie is called Rampage is because the virus is called, or the monster gas is called Rampage Monster Gas.
Fine.
I guess they're also fans of the game because they have one.
They have an arcade cabinet, and it's such a weird shout out. I don't understand.
And it's not like if you know what it is, you could glimpse it. It's pretty clearly seen in the background.
It's like the Chronicles of Riddick poster in like 50 Shades 2, where you're just like, you can't not see it. You're like, why are you foregrounding that? That's so weird.
Yeah.
So they have this plan. They're going to use this monster gas, but now it's out everywhere, and monsters are being destroyed, and so they have to find a way to contain it. So they send out a strike force led by Joe Manganiello, who I love, so that's cool.
It's Manganiello.
Is it Manganiello?
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. I apologize. Either way, they send Deathstroke the Terminator out to stop the wolf. That scene goes really awry, and it's totally awesome. But the main story is Dwayne Johnson and George. George is an ape who's very intelligent and actually knows sign language and can communicate with Dwayne Johnson.
And is crass.
It's got a vulgar sense of humor. Yeah, likes to flip people off like a jerk.
He holds out his fist for like a fist bump, and just as Dwayne Johnson is moving in for a fist bump, he flips him the bird.
Yeah.
And then he laughs. The animation on the ape was pretty great because he looked really. They give him like these big expressive eyes, and
he's really likable character, really, like just visually appealing.
When it comes to kaiju, I don't like them to look too animal because then they're just animals, and that's less interesting than a monster. Yeah. Godzilla's not an animal. I don't see him as a dinosaur. Well, he's a Godzilla.
He's a biped, so he's got that added level of humanity to him, and we sort of look at Godzilla as, but for a quirk of genetics, that could be me.
I am almost a Godzilla.
Yeah.
He is in all of us.
We find out he's only 3 chromosomes different from us. I don't know how the DNA works. But yeah, George is a King Kong. He's a smaller King Kong. He's Mighty Joe Young. And he's very likable as a character. And what's really interesting is that as he starts growing, we see his fear. Like what's happening to him. He doesn't understand what's happening to his body. And we see Dwayne Johnson really worried for his friend. Dwayne Johnson, his character.
He convincingly plays someone who is not comfortable with humans.
Yeah.
Which is impossible for someone like Dwayne Johnson to do because he's one of the most affable human beings on the planet.
Well, but yet I think he pulls it off because the whole thing is people are attracted to him because he is confident and nice and funny and loves animals and good at his job. He doesn't like humans for a variety of reasons, which we explore in some flashbacks and some dialogue. He's had some really horrible things happen to him in his life. He's also just really...
A nice dude,
and kind of an introvert in a lot of ways. And I'm not entirely confident, but honestly, I think there's a decent chance the way he's playing him is intended to be asexual in a way that is something that's almost like the way that the Transporter, the first 2 Transporter movies, the director intended him to be gay. They just didn't say it out loud. And then in the third movie, they changed that because that got public and people didn't like it, and that was stupid, but I digress. Here it really does feel like he's playing because he has all of these wonderful scenes with Naomi Harris from the James Bond movie. She plays a scientist who's partly responsible for the creation of this monster gas, and there's no romantic chemistry like at all. There's friend chemistry, but there's no romantic chemistry, and it's kind of nice to see in this big giant blockbuster movie that just not being shoehorned in there, and it's all just about people being nice to each other. It's not It's not tawdry at all.
You could make it a little less violent, and this would be a PG-rated film. I love Naomi Harris. I love Dwayne Johnson. I do like that it's a friendship rather than a relationship, despite what the ape tried to imply near the end.
Right at the end, but like even they're just like, no, we're cool.
Yeah,
we're just friends.
And you haven't yet mentioned Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who plays Yosemite Sam in this movie. Jeffrey Dean Morgan strolls in as the government agent who's trying to explain things like, well, your monster virus is getting out.
I don't know why.
Would you like some fried chicken? It's like
he's auditioning to be the new Colonel.
Yeah.
I don't know why he did it like that.
And spices.
But I think it's another one where you see him in the movie and he is so obviously the shitty government agent, and the accent extra sells that because he sounds super condescending. And he talks about what my granddaddy used to say, like all these sort of familiar cliches. And then over the course of the film, you find out he's really not that bad.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, like it really does subvert your expectation.
But his smarminess is strangely charming. And I think that's the greatest way to describe Rampage. It's strangely charming.
And smarmy.
And smarmy, too. Which may be a strange thing to say about a kaiju film, but I think that's kind of what you need. You need a little bit of heart, a little bit of human heart in there to punctuate the ridiculousness of the mayhem. And luckily, this film also doesn't skimp on the mayhem.
No, there's so much mayhem.
The monsters...
Throughout the whole movie, too. They don't save it all for the end.
There's a big climax in Chicago where just a bunch of monsters are going on a rampage, and that's kind of what you came to see, and it doesn't disappoint. It does drag along the middle. Yeah. There's a lot of sort of plot near the beginning, and then there's a lot of just sort of chasing around and exposition when the monsters are not really featured.
But I like the characters enough that I like getting through that.
I like
because again, it's all
I like
about
them enough that you
thing.
can get through that, but it doesn't necessarily lift the film. It actually starts to slow down a bit. It's like let's just pick it up a little bit.
Fair enough. And I think there's some missed opportunities here as well for some weird stuff they kind of set up that could happen, and they never go there.
Yeah. I like. We know where George is the whole time. He's sort of the main monster. Ralph, the weirdos on the internet call him Ralph.
That's the wolf.
We're following the wolf. Lizzie is the surprise.
Yeah, we see Lizzie get created at the beginning, but Lizzie is underwater the whole time, so no one knows she's there. So, and you can see this coming a mile away in the movie, but, at the end when they're finding, oh, good, George and the wolf are here. Well, we will take this out. Now there's a giant alligator.
It's got tusks.
No one told us about this one.
Shoot at it.
This movie's weird.
Yeah. And... I've seen many a giant ape in movies before. I've seen plenty of King Kongs. I've seen something that looks exactly like Lizzie. Lizzie looks a lot like Baragon from the Godzilla movies.
Sure.
Just a sort of quadrupedal spiked thing.
Yeah.
Ain't never seen a giant wolf.
I've seen
that's a new one.
Isn't there a giant wolf in Thor Ragnarok?
Is there?
Isn't Fenrir in there somewhere?
I don't recall.
I think I've seen a giant wolf.
Not like a 50-foot tall wolf.
That's a pretty big fucking wolf. I'll give you that.
And I think that's novel, and they find novel ways around it and through it, and I think it's exciting to watch.
They're having a lot of fun making this movie. It translates to the screen.
A person gets eaten.
It's good-natured, and the cast is likable enough that a lot of it's casting. Naomi Harris is inherently likable. Dwayne Johnson is inherently likable. Jeffrey Dean Morgan is inherently likable. So we want them to be okay. And there's enough of a threat because shit is insane that it keeps your attention the whole time. We were talking about this afterwards, and I remain convinced that, for better or worse, this is the second best American kaiju movie after the original King Kong.
Yeah. And a lot of people even debate whether or not King Kong even counts because it predates Godzilla.
Godzilla was the invention of what we consider the kaiju genre, which is basically the giant monster genre. But King Kong is at least a predecessor, much in the same way Halloween kind of codified the slasher. But before that, we had Black Christmas and Psycho. It didn't come from nowhere. So if you want to talk about American giant monster movies, there's King Kong. And basically, there's Rampage, and I like a lot of the other ones, but a lot of them, Kong Skull Island, has some really cool stuff in it. It also thinks it's more serious than it is a lot of the time.
It's serviceable more than anything. It's entertaining, but it's not great.
I like a lot of the stuff in the more recent Godzilla. I think the sense of scale is really great, and there's a couple of really cool set pieces, but most of that movie you forget immediately.
It's a Godzilla tease is what that movie is.
I like so many individual things about it, but just most of the movie is gone.
Yeah, and it's way too long.
I defend Peter Jackson's King Kong, but I admit it's too long.
I don't. Nobody likes Roland Emmerich's Godzilla.
And with good cause.
And there have been a few others here and there, mostly spoofs.
And,
But,
and a lot of Sci-Fi Channel original movies, but most of them just can't compete.
I
Good
agree.
one.
This is the good one.
This is the first
best
good one we've had in a
since-
long time.
Also, it might be the best theatrically released American video game movie. They finally did it because, and we've complained about this before. I've complained about this before. Most video games that they try to adapt have already taken their cues from a lot of B movies. We get a lot of the iconography from video games from movies, like the assassins or the spies,
the
like
Space
action
Marines.
all of that. These all come from B films that we've seen in the past. Space Marines are essentially Alien, and
Aliens, but yeah.
So if you're going to make something like Metroid into a movie, you don't need to focus on the mythology of Metroid. You need to get back to the heart of it. You essentially need to make an Alien knockoff. Of course, there's thousands of those, but that's really the most efficient way to do it.
And then once you make that Alien knockoff, it's just going to feel like a knockoff. Yeah.
Thankfully, Rampage, you put in a corner and you're just standing next to a building as a monster and you just start punching. There's no mythology. You don't need to know. There's one sentence. You took a tainted vitamin, now you're a gorilla. Go. It's like, okay, here we go. That's all you need. This is humanity, and fuck humanity. That's the premise of the game.
They took a video game with a really visceral, entertaining concept,
and they turned it into a pretty stripped down. I mean, the story is. It doesn't need to be quite that complicated. It doesn't matter really.
But again, my point: good, kind of stupid.
Yeah.
See, they didn't overthink it to the extent where it's like, no, we really need to talk about how this DNA gas works. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's DNA gas. You brought it.
It's monster gas.
You said just enough dialogue to make it sound like it isn't completely stupid, but it is mostly stupid, and you acknowledge that, and you just move on.
And it's all like brightly, evenly lit. Everybody's overplaying a little bit, so they're clearly all having a lot of fun making this movie.
It feels like a monster. Tonally, it feels like a monster Fast and Furious movie. Like that's the kind of cheese. Because I think there's a difference between camp and cheese. Camp is an accident. Camp is you were trying to do something sincere and it came off kind of funny by accident or inexperience. Cheese is we're having a good time. We're just making it silly, and we know it's silly, and that's okay. And that can be really, really fun if you do it right.
And they did it right in Rampage.
I would put it this way: Rampage is up there with Tomb Raider for me as the best live action video game movie we've had so far. But Rampage does have the distinction of we really don't have a lot of films like it, whereas Tomb Raider is ultimately kind of an Indiana Jones knockoff.
Yeah.
So Rampage feels a little fresher.
But I think Tomb Raider went the right way in making it sort of feel like an Indiana Jones knockoff.
Sure,
I
exactly.
think. Again, that's one that drags in the middle and has far more unintentional stupidity, so I can't really get behind that one.
Perhaps.
But,
I still really liked it, though. But yeah, I think Rampage is a real winner. And yeah, I highly recommend Rampage on our critically acclaimed scale of C- to C+. I give Rampage a C+. It's fun.
C+. And that C is eating the plus, because that plus is a person, and the C is a monster.
Yeah. And BLUMHOUSE'S Truth or Dare, C-. It's a really bad film.
It's big stinker.
It's not good.
Big stink ball.
Okay, moving on.
Blumhouse has a really great reputation for making these low-budget, high-concept kind of films.
And they make them cheaply.
And they make them on the cheap, and they're effective. I'm thinking of Happy Death Day, for instance.
Yeah, Happy Death Day is great.
Happy Death Day is great, and they have, for the most part, been really good about taking their really trim, high-concept premises and casting them with really charming actors and really exploring the ideas enough so it makes an entertaining horror flick. They didn't do that with Truth or Dare.
No.
I kind of wish they had.
I'm sure it was inexpensive. It's not going to sink the studio. That's the thing.
Nothing can sink the studio because each one of these films only costs like $500,000 to make.
Yeah. They make them cheap.
They would need 50 failures in a row to do something
They make them cheap.
Oh.
And sometimes they're good and sometimes they're really shitty, and this is a really shitty one. Let's move on.
Okay, we have our double feature.
Our main event. Now, again, all throughout the month of April, you pick the good movie. And all of your options this week, were...
all this month, we've had you pick the good movies.
That's what I mean.
And we are going to pair it with the bad one, which is inverse to our usual rule.
Usually you pick the bad one, we pick the good one. But this week, your films were all from the French New Wave, and I could see the eyes rolling on the internet. You didn't even have to put the emoji. Everyone was just like, oh, God, you're so pretentious. And I love the French New Wave, and one thing I wish I could impart upon you, how exciting the French New Wave is, and how akin the French New Wave is to a lot of the movies that we like today and in recent history. The French New Wave mostly, not entirely, but mostly was spearheaded by a lot of film critics who were kind of the first generation to absorbed so many films that they started to see life through the perspective of cinema. And they started making movies that were not only good stories, but were kind of comments on cinema and the way that we view cinema as a filter.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of really self-aware, exciting, energetic, youthful, thrilling motion pictures made in a wide variety of genres.
Yeah, the one that is often credited as kicking off the whole movement is Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless, which you could have voted for, but you didn't. And in that one, Jean-Paul Belmondo plays a character who is very clearly, openly in the film, modeling his look and his behavior off of Humphrey Bogart from Humphrey Bogart movies. And there's
a romanticized criminality that he got from a lot of these movies. And he lives an outlaw lifestyle.
He lives an outlaw lifestyle, which ends up being, very tragic, but to him, he's sort of trying to capture something that he's learned just from film, not from life, and that is the notion of cool. And this generation of filmmakers was the first generation really to grow up with films all around from day one. True, I know the format is much older than that, but the previous generations came to films later in their lives.
Or films were more rarefied. There weren't as many.
And here it was a really common experience growing up around cinema, and this was the first generation to start making films about that experience. And that's something that leaks down to today.
Yeah, and also
you look at not just Scream. You look at Quentin Tarantino or anything that feels like it's quoting something previously. And now we're living through this huge wave of nostalgia, and we owe that all to Breathless.
In fact, the nostalgia wave that we're experiencing now is not unlike the nostalgia wave that the French New Wave experienced. The French New Wave was, a lot of them were consisted of, again, film critics from a French magazine called Cahiers du Cinéma, which a lot of those articles are still available in book form, and if you love movies, they'll blow your mind. Some of the shit they were thinking of, it's so cool. But
you need to read a couple though, because they're operating on this weird level beyond even the highest falutin of critics.
When you think about people oh, you're overthinking Ready Player One, you have no fucking idea.
What I love about Cahiers du Cinéma is that they'll trash everything.
Yeah.
Except for one weird one that's really bad.
Yeah, it's it had odd taste. And this is the generation of film critics that really, for the first time, celebrated someone like Alfred Hitchcock as a true artist. Now, Alfred Hitchcock, he'd had some Oscar-nominated movies. One of his movies won Best Picture, but to most people, he was seen as, he makes thrillers. He makes them good.
He makes mainstream thrillers. Yeah, he was the commercial guy.
Yeah, he was the John Carpenter or the Steven Spielberg of his day, and a lot of people weren't really respecting that. And there was a whole generation of film critics who grew up with his movies and inherently respected them and said, no, all of this stuff has artistic value. So all of the mainstream entertainment that everyone is writing off as artistically we see value in it, and we're going to filter that through the art that you like, and we're going to put it all together. So when you see something like Stranger Things, where they take all these 80s mentalities and tropes and try to do something new with it in a new mold, that's something that the French New Wave kind of helped pioneer in the cinematic medium. Yeah. So it's all connected, and it's really exciting. The film where you voted for, and I'm really glad you did, is a film by Jacques Demy called The Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
A.K.A. Mr. Agnes Varda, really.
Well, fair enough. He was married to Agnes Varda for many years.
Yeah.
And Agnes Varda, of course, is one of the great filmmakers. And we actually had a film of hers on the list that you could have voted for called Cleo from 5 to 7, which is also one of my favorite movies. And I really want you to watch that someday because it's fantastic.
I think it came in dead last, unfortunately.
Probably did. But The Milos of Cherbourg is a film that sort of combines a sort of mid-20th century sort of romantic realism. The idea that romance is kind of in many ways banal and everyday. It's not all trumped up and super hugely melodramatic. And then he takes a super melodramatic movie style and applies it to it. And it becomes this glorious contradiction that is amazing.
It's an opera about ordinary people, and he films... I haven't seen colors like this until Speed Racer. There's electric purples and fuchsia stabbing beams of light, and Catherine Deneuve and her pink, and just all these explosive colors all around her. And he's trying to really heighten the super reality of this really ordinary lifestyle. And it's an opera. All of the dialogue is sung. And but none of it's not in like song form. There aren't like songs, as it were.
It
it's just
almost
people,
never rhymes. It's
a
lot of it is
they're
just
talking
chit
about,
chat.
and they're always like, I'm gonna go to the bar after work. Okay, be sure to lock up before you go. It's like they're not really singing anything of substance. But Jacques Demy is using that French New Wave trope of trying to use cinematic language to comment on how this is how they see the world. They see the world through this like cinematic eye. So to all of these characters, the world is this colorful opera, even though they're not doing anything interesting.
And also just the idea that everything is important.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we look at like other stories sometimes and we say to ourselves, that's interesting or that's not interesting. And we're totally allowed to make that distinction as audience members, especially if we have to pay to see something. At the same time, to the characters in these stories, whatever their problems are, those are their problems. That is everything to them.
Yeah.
They are the stars of their movies. And their movie is very romantic and very tragic. It's the story of two young lovers. One of them played by the incredible Catherine Deneuve. And the other one, oh God, what's his name? I'm going to forget his name. Hang on.
Oh, golly.
I'm so...
I just watched it, too.
I know. What do we got here? It's Catherine Deneuve and Nino Castelnuovo.
That's right.
That's why I always forget his name, so that's kind of weird. So they play Geneviève and Guy. They're young lovers. Her mother owns a fancy umbrella shop. That's all they sell, is fancy umbrellas. And Guy is a mechanic. Yeah. And they are in love, and they want to get married. And they can't get married yet because he has compulsory military service, and he's going to be sent to war in Algeria for 2 years. So they have one last bittersweet night together. He goes off to war, and she's pregnant.
She's pregnant, she's in a rut, and she is given an out.
That's right.
Well, a social out, as it were.
He's gone for a long time. They start having this emotional distance because he's going through war, and they can only communicate irregularly. And life and society is hard. And she ends up having a suitor who's nice. Well, really nice.
And her mom is really overbearing and saying, you know, you're pregnant. This is really shameful. We need to set you up with like a husband and a home. But without
being shrill about it.
No,
and I like her for that. She's not practical, but she's not romantic.
She's not like some super villainess out of like a derivative Jane Austen situation. She's. Yeah, she understands the practicality of the situation. She's not just a harpy.
Yeah.
And so, she says, well, there's this suitor. He's a nice guy.
Doesn't care that I'm pregnant with someone else's kid.
He can take care of you. He can take care of the child. And he's actually a really good guy.
Yeah.
He's not a super villain by any stretch.
And after a while...
Yeah, she decides, that's really my best choice here. And I like this guy now. So, let's go for it.
And then Guy comes home from the war and realizes that the woman he loved has married someone else. And, you know, he's still dealing with post-traumatic stress. His mother, I think it's his mother, right? Is it mother who's dying?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. He's got a dying mother. He's heartbroken. And he's got to figure out how to pick up the pieces, and then he ends up marrying his mother's nurse after his mother dies. And it's all about settling. It's all about, they're really romantic, everything is perfect, everything's wonderful, and then life gets in the way, and we make some choices that maybe we regret or maybe turned out for the best, and that is all hugely operatic. It's actually kind of a mild story. It's not Rampage. It's really mild. And yet it plays big.
It's a mild story, and it's a realistic story. You could take the music out, and this would be a compelling, like, realist drama. And I think Jacques Demy did that purposefully.
I think so, too.
Because he's trying to not just pay homage to that sort of really colorful, beautiful Hollywood-type musical that's leaked into his generation, but he's also trying to send it up in a way. Movies don't end well because movies shouldn't end well because life doesn't end well.
Which is kind of a cynical perspective, but it's honest.
There's definitely a bit of cynicism in there, and these people don't end up happy with each other the way you think they might at the beginning of the film. They end up content and more adult, which is something you don't see in the movies that have the happily ever after.
Yeah.
Which is why a lot of people compare La La Land to this, because it has sort of an unexpected ending where they don't end up together.
It's very bittersweet.
Yeah. And I don't sense it's necessarily bittersweet. I think it's more like look, this is what would really happen. Even if we were to take a Hollywood musical beyond that happily ever after, where, a Hollywood musical would end with that wonderful final night, and then he goes off to war and is like, well, and I'll write you every day, and either he dies and he dies tragically, or there's this grand return and I'm back and we're together again.
Yeah.
If you look at like a lot of films from the 1940s from America, that's kind of how that would end.
Yeah.
He's saying that's not how real life operates, so we're going to have real life with Hollywood smeared on top of it.
Or in the background. I think one of my favorite... I hadn't really thought about this scene too much. I've seen this movie like 3 or 4 times.
Uh-huh.
And until I watched it last night, I never really thought about... There's this one scene. It's after Guy has left, and Genevieve and her mother are talking about just the practical issues of, look, I love you. I'm looking forward to meeting your child. It is inconvenient that you don't have a husband, and that's the way society works. And they're just having this very practical conversation about writing to Guy, you have another suitor, here's all the stuff that's going on, we're worried about money, and they're all in the shop, and then throughout the huge windows in the background, there is a huge festival going on, and people are like dancing down the streets like every sperm is sacred from Monty Python and the Meaning of Life. And that's going on, but this is what's really going on, and this is what's really important. And it takes... this movie, which was very foregrounded as lavish and gorgeous and extravagant. There's no real dancing to speak of, but like it's very colorful and vibrant in Hollywood. And that was the foreground initially, and now that's all in the background. And now it's all about this real life drama. Someone pointed out, and they're right, I don't know if I'd never thought of it before, but they really made me think about it real hard. Someone pointed out on Twitter when I just said, by the way, I'm watching Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and I love it. No, there's no bad guy in this movie.
No
one. People make decisions that maybe they regret, but they're all doing the best they can, and they're just trying to live a nice life. And sometimes the decisions you make in the attempt to do that hurt other people and make you unhappy or less happy than you would be.
That's one of the markers of the French New Wave. The antagonists were also the protagonists. They were their own worst enemies. They were the ones who made the bad decisions almost uniformly throughout most of the films of the French New Wave. There isn't that sort of conventional relationship, I think because they were trying to acknowledge that the bad guys weren't external anymore. This was a post-war period, after all. We weren't dealing with bugaboos overseas any longer. We were kind of looking inward at this point. And so, they were using a really conventional Hollywood mold where there were clean-cut good guys and bad guys. Maybe there was some ambiguity to the good guy or the bad guy, but they were pretty clearly delineated, and trying to say that moral absolutism is an internal conflict, and we're going to deal with sort of the interiorness of that conflict. Another thing that I appreciate, and this I see a lot in just French cinema in general, and I'm sorry to say French cinema in general, if your eyes are rolling too fast, but a lot of critics have pointed out that American movies tend to be about plot and story, whereas European movies tend to be more about characters.
That's a broad generalization.
It's definitely a broad generalization, but I understand what is meant when that is said. And so if we're focusing on the characters in a love story, I like that a lot of French movies try to key in the practicalities of having a romance. Which is something we don't usually see in a lot of American films. We romanticize it. We think of like the thrill of first love and how great it is, and will we make it to a point where there's happily ever after? French cinema thinks of it vocationally. When are we going to go to this job? Who's going to do the work? Who's going to take home money? Like, they're actually thinking practically about the romance, because the job aspect of the romance.
Well, because most American movies end with the couple getting together.
Yeah.
And after that, there's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
there's trying to find a comfortable a dynamic and a rhythm and sharing responsibilities. And all of those things can be, in their own way, very romantic and very sweet and very dramatic.
Yeah.
But they tend not to be as thrilling as will they or won't they confess love.
Well, if you have the patience for it, I would like to recommend that you see Blue is the Warmest Color, because this film does it perfectly, because it has that thrill of first love, the thrill of first getting together, the thrill of first sex, and then needing to figure out each other's worlds over this long extended period, how you're going to work, what is your job, how does that get in the way, what kind of person are you after you're together. And I think that a lot of French romances that I've seen tend to deal with that. And I think Umbrellas of Cherbourg with its sort of not even a bittersweet ending, just kind of a bitter ending.
No, I don't think it's that bitter. I think there's a melancholy to it.
Yeah,
but I think ultimately they end up fine.
They don't seem happy to have seen each other.
There's a lot of unresolved baggage. But I think what you bring up though, that sort of difference between sort of the American approach to romance and the European approach to romance really is rather personified by La La Land, which Damien Chazelle, I believe he's called Umbrellas of Cherbourg his favorite film, and I totally see why. And
if he hasn't, I could easily put those words in his mouth.
And he has said that it was a key influence on La La Land. Now, you've probably seen La La Land. I think Witney already spoiled the ending, so I'm sorry if that's the case. La La Land is a story of two young artists. They're struggling artists. One's a musician, one's an actor, who meet. They are at odds with one another. They end up falling in love, and then their careers kind of tear them apart. That is a way more plot-centric version of this, and you can tell by the film's ending. Whereas Umbrellas of Cherbourg is all about two people who, after they've grown apart, they've married other people, they've had kids, and they just meet, and it's awkward, and they have share a bit of a moment where it's just like, yeah,
we had a thing, we just don't anymore.
Might have been nice, but life got in the way, and everyone's like, okay, well, bit of a disappointment, and now let's go back to our respective lovely kids. Great. Not great, but you know what I mean. Like, it's fine. Yeah. Like, that's the way it is. La La Land, the idea that these characters don't end up together is seen as this great tragedy.
Yeah,
and there's this huge sequence,
element of loss.
And there's this huge fantasy sequence, which is really quite thrilling and very sweet, and I like the ending fine. But it's a totally different way to play this, and it really treats, like, it's not just life got in the way, it's that these two lovers got screwed by life. And you should feel bad. And I'm like, I don't really. Like, it's just shit happens, and La La Land doesn't have that shit happens quality. La La Land really romanticizes it. And La La Land focuses on like how we're going to really romanticize this, and Umbrellas of Cherbourg talks about how we're going to kind of strip the romanticization out, even though stylistically it's very romantic. They're a good double feature together, and I think you'll see ultimately, at least I see it this way, that Umbrellas of Cherbourg is the more mature, more hypnotic version of La La Land. And La La Land feels like it's not as Hollywood as it could be, but it's the Hollywood version of Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
It's the Americanized version of the Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
And when you're talking about the idea of a filmmaker who's kind of filtering their ideas of love through earlier versions of musicals and maybe they didn't do it right.
Oh no, we're careening towards something. I can feel it.
We're going to talk about Peter Bogdanovich's At Long Last Love.
Oh, must we?
This is a movie that
you chose this one
as revenge, and you chose the last two in a row, and I was mad at you each time. And I said, next, that's like two truths and a dare. I'm going to get you this time.
All right, and boy, did you have? Oh, boy, yeah. Howdy, did you?
Had you ever seen At Long Last Love before?
Only bits and pieces. I never actually sit like from beginning to end and watched it, and now I have.
It's not good.
Wow, is it bad?
At Long Last Love is a film that came out in
75, I think.
Is it 75? 75.
All right.
Directed by Peter Bogdanovich, another film critic turned director. I don't think Jacques Demy was a film critic turned director, but a lot of the French New Wave filmmakers were.
Yeah.
Peter Bogdanovich started off as a film critic. He ended up directing The Last Picture Show and a bunch of other acclaimed motion pictures in the 1970s, and then he shot his career in the foot with a film called At Long Last Love, which is a huge ode to the 1930s musical tradition of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, films like Swing Time or Top Hat.
Specifically Cole Porter, so Anything Goes, that sort of thing.
Yeah. It starred a lot of hot young stars at the time. Sybil Shepherd, who would go on to probably be best known for the TV series Moonlighting, but
she was already in The Last Picture Show. And she had worked with Peter Bogdanovich.
She was already a movie star, and I think they were dating in real life. And honestly, I really find her very magnetic. I think she's a really good screen presence in general. Burt Reynolds, who was kind of at the top of the world, one of the more likable movie stars at the time. Madeline Kahn, who
one of the world's great comedians.
Yep, I think she was already coming off of her Oscar nomination for Blazing Saddles. She didn't win for that, did she?
No, I don't.
Okay. No. Madeline Kahn, she was in Clue. She was in Young Frankenstein. She's a great comedian and singer and dancer. And then
Eileen Brennan.
Also
from Clue.
Yeah, another great comedic wunderkind. And then also an actor who I'm less familiar with called Duilo Del Prete, who was in a lot of Italian motion pictures. Duilio, I apologize.
Duilio del Prete as Johnny Spanish.
Which is, get ready, because that's the funniest joke in the movie.
And John Hillerman from Magnum.
Yeah,
plays the chauffeur, and he gets a few songs too.
John Hillerman steals this movie, by the way.
He's the only. I think Emmett Walsh steals the movie as
in 1.5 scenes.
In 1.5 scenes, because he's the doorman. He's just sort of chattering to himself. It's like, oh, why isn't Carl Reiner doing something with this?
And Emmett Walsh is doing his W.C. Fields impersonation, and it's a great W.C. Fields impersonation. The idea is that Peter Bogdanovich is making a musical. It was the first musical in many decades in which all of the actors were singing on stage, were singing on the set, not pre-recorded, and doing all their own dancing, doing long takes. It was going to be filmed in a very ultra-stylized, romanticized set direction, costume design, cinematography, using all of these classic songs.
They're all classic
songs.
It's a jukebox musical of Cole Porter songs.
Yep. And where he messed up was his cast mostly couldn't sing or dance. Also, the script wasn't very good. Also, the songs didn't really make a lot of sense half the time. Also, it's way too long.
How long is the movie? It's like 9-10 hours?
To about 87 hours.
Yeah. It's under 2 hours long, but it feels like it's 4 hours long. It just drags and drags and drags. Yeah. And the story, such as it is a bunch of rich drunk. Think of all of the most obnoxious characters from The Great Gatsby. Just take the one most obnoxious character from The Great Gatsby and just make 5 of them. And that's this musical. And they're all kind of drunk. They're all really rich. They don't give a damn about anything. And
they don't have problems.
They have no problems.
Even the poor guy makes a lot of money gambling.
Yeah, in an early scene, Burt Reynolds gets out of a car while he's drunk in the morning, because he's drinking in the back of the car in the morning, and he falls off the car and runs into Madeline Kahn, who is also drunk in the morning. He lands on top of her and says, why don't we have a relationship and sing Cole Porter songs? She's like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, everyone's very whatever the entire time.
And that's I think that's really the movie's downfall, where the characters don't seem thrilled to be singing. They don't seem to be having fun that they're singing. They're just sort of drunkenly singing. It's like going to a karaoke bar.
Yeah.
Surely everybody's had this experience where you go to a karaoke bar and there's a large group of drunks there and they're ahead of you, and you have to wait through all of their songs before you get to sing, and they're clearly celebrating some kind of cast party. Like they just came from some show that they had starred in, so they have prepared choreography that they're doing out on the karaoke stage, or they're re-singing songs that they just sang on stage, but now they're doing it much, much worse because they're all drunk and they don't care anymore. That's what watching At Long Last Love is like, is waiting through that drunken group of people waiting for your turn to sing. You might like the songs they chose, but they're not doing it well. They're clearly on some sort of wavelength that you don't understand. They're having way more fun than you are.
That's probably true. One of the many downfalls. At Long Last Love is considered by many to be one of the worst movies ever made. Certainly one of the worst musicals. Nowadays, it's not very well remembered because it wasn't on home video for a long time. Then they actually
let's remember it now as one of the worst musicals.
Real fast, isn't it? Because the history is kind of weird. They released At Long Last Love. The reviews were merciless. When people are like, "Oh, critics are so mean nowadays," you'd have no fucking idea how mean people used to be. Like, when dancing, the stars look as if they're trying to extinguish a campfire. That's a quote.
TV Guide said it went down like a stricken elephant. It's really great.
Sybil Shepherd plays a snotty little rich girl with a notion of sophistication that is underpassed only by her acting ability. I will not even sully my pen by making it describe her singing and dancing. That was on the National Review. That was a big publication. Yeah. People were mean back in the day. Bogdanovich recut the film, cut it down a little bit. And then it got like a quick home video release, like right at the dawn of home video, forgotten forever. Then it turns out that someone had re-edited the movie without Peter Bogdanovich knowing about it, so that it kind of matched more like the original like script notes and everything. And Peter Bogdanovich found out that version was streaming on Netflix, and he finally watched it for the first time in decades and said, "Oh, I like this version better." And now that's the version. That's the version that's on Blu-ray. That's the version I saw. It's probably the version you saw.
No, I saw an old VHS version.
You might have seen. I'm not sure which version you saw. My version still sucks. So this is the good version.
Yeah,
I can only imagine how bad it was back then.
We started to talk about the story, but we stopped because it's
okay. Here's a story. Hold on.
Burt Reynolds and Madeline Kahn.
Burt Reynolds is a wealthy bored guy who's a drunk. Madeline Kahn is a singer and dancer at a vaudeville type show where she has one of the worst musical numbers I've ever seen in my life.
Just two of the worst musical numbers.
Well, the only ones I think she does on stage is the one where she wants to have sex with a caveman, and there's a whole bunch of cavemen, some of whom are wearing glasses, which I almost thought was funny. And they're just kind of stalking her around the stage. And to the movie's credit, at the very least, everyone in the audience at the show is looking at it going, "What?"
She wants a brave man. She wants a caveman.
I don't get it.
It's like that deleted scene from Nightbreed. Remember when the heroine gets up on stage and sings the entirety of Johnny Get Angry for no reason whatsoever in the middle of this Clive Barker horror movie with
I kind of prefer the original cut of Nightbreed, but
I do too. It's like I was really excited. Finally, I get to see
there's a couple of things I like.
Is bad.
There's a couple of scenes that should have been in there, but mostly the theatrical cut is better. So Burt Reynolds and Madeline Kahn end up together. Sybil Shepherd plays a wealthy socialite. Was wealthy. Her father lost all the money in the crash, and now she's kind of scrimping by. But
in a very good humored sort of way. She doesn't really seem destitute ever.
She's not concerned. She knows that she's from a good family and she's white and nothing terribly bad will ever happen to her.
Yeah, she can seduce whatever rich man she wants.
She realizes she should probably marry well. Eileen Brennan plays her rather down-to-earth maid, I guess.
Some sort of servant, I think.
Yeah. And she runs into Johnny Spanish. So Johnny Spanish, really? It's really Johnny Spanish as the Italian. Spanish. Wow. She runs into Johnny Spanish. She thinks he's rich, doesn't realize he's poor, and he's a gambler. They end up... it turns out that she knew Madeline Kahn in school, and they all decide to get together at Burt Reynolds' gorgeous chalet for the weekend to screw around and do nothing. And then they screw around and do nothing for 80 hours.
And then Mom comes over and chases a peacock, and somebody goes swimming in a suit.
Mom immediately gets out of her limousine, grabs a football, and runs across the field and spikes it as everyone is playing football in tuxedos. See The Room? You didn't invent that shit. Bad movies have been doing that since the 70s. Okay.
Tommy Wiseau, what a hack. I know, right?
Oh, my God. They end up having a big song and dance number, and at the end of it, Burt Reynolds and Sybil Shepherd start making moon eyes at each other. And, of course, they weren't the ones who were dating. And so Madeline Kahn and Johnny Spanglish...
Spanglish?
I can't believe I just did that.
Spain-Talian.
I was thinking about Judd Apatow, because he was talking about...
the movie Spanglish?
No, he's talking about Milos Forman, and I was just... I guess I had Judd Apatow on the brain. Madeline Kahn and Johnny Spanish, they decide they're going to start dating in order to get back at them, but of course they actually fall in love, and
they essentially
everyone gets jealous,
and they get kind of jealous, and then they just sort of switch.
Yeah, the movie. That's it. The movie opens. The opening credits of "At Long Last Love" are kind of perfectly encapsulate not only the plot of the movie but just how shitty it is, because it's a music box, and there are two couples waltzing together in this music box, and they're dancing around, and it's really boring. And nothing's happening. Just dancing around. It's not even an interesting looking music box. And then the credits stop, and the characters switch partners. Like, it's supposed to blow your fucking mind, right? And then they keep dancing together, and then the credits end. And that's the movie in a nutshell. It's boring and simple.
And that happens in a scene near the end, in a big dance. Like, well, we're dancing with the people we don't really want to be with anymore. Why don't we just switch partners? Okay.
Yeah.
The end. That's it. They're just, okay. No real conflict at all. No real drama.
Nothing interesting.
Now, it's punctuated by Cole Porter songs. And Cole Porter is one of the great American songwriters. He wrote Anything Goes. He wrote hundreds and hundreds of songs that you know very well. If you haven't seen the film DeLovely, there's this really great show. It's not a great film. It's a good film. But there's a lot of really great celebrity showcases of, like, I think Elvis Costello sings It's DeLovely, or Diana Krall sings Begin the Begin. You know, there's a really great sacredness to Cole Porter. in DeLovely because they're treating him with really great respect. Here, they're just sort of like spitting out all these clever song lyrics without any sort of intonation, without any sense of humor, without any sort of actual presentation. They're just singing flatly rather than performing those songs.
And here's the thing. Most of the movie, there is dialogue, but most of the movie is actually singing. I would argue that probably at least 2/3 of what the things people come out of their mouths.
There's a lot of songs.
There's a lot of it. And they're not using Cole Porter to tell the story very well. And a lot of the times, the songs that they're singing to each other don't actually have a hell of a lot to do with what's going on. And yet they're yelling them at each other as though it does. Like Eileen Brennan and John Hillerman as Burt Reynolds' long-suffering butler.
Yeah,
who is the funniest person in the movie because he's the only person who looks at all these idiots and just gets to treat them as a bit of an idiot. But he is good-natured enough that he's not anti the movie, so he works real well. But Eileen Brennan is totally in love with him. I totally get it, by the way. And they have this incredibly long Cole Porter song about do you do this stuff? And he says, "Yes, I do, but not in the morning." I'm not singing it. I'm just telling you what it's all about. Now imagine repeating, "Do you do this?" No, it's like green eggs and ham for I don't know, like a day. Like a day out of your life is what you're hearing this. And you get the impression it's supposed to be flirtatious, but there's no flirting going on. And what she's asking him isn't actually anything to do with what they're doing on screen. And you're just waiting for it to end. That's what most of the songs are. Like Johnny Spanish has a song about oh, the sun will come out tomorrow, and he's a big fan of the comic strip Annie. Like that's his one character trait. So the fact that it's kind of like the Annie song is almost a reference, but he's just talking about how listen, I'm a gambler.
Annie wasn't a big film yet. Annie came out like 7 years after this. So,
but the musical existed though, didn't it?
The musical existed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like at some point, I bet someone thought that was funny, but whatever. It's an old Cole Porter song. He's saying it's about tomorrow will be better, and as a gambler, it's what he believes, but he just won't shut up about it, and he just starts yelling it at people across the street, and they're like, "Look, we don't like you. We don't know you. All of these guys in tuxedos are mad at you because you took their money. Their tomorrow sucks because of you. Shut up! Just shut up!" You ever wanted to yell, "Just shut up" at a movie? Like, this is the one you just want to yell, "Just shut up."
I can only think of one instance where I actually said "shut up" at a movie, and it was when we were watching Kevin Smith's Tusk.
Oh, God. Yeah,
and there was a scene where Michael Parks had put on this really strange accent, like this really kind of weird voice, and
it was the one with Johnny Depp.
And he was being interviewed by Johnny Depp, who had this really horrible pidgin French Canadian accent. And
they were
just sort of improvising at each other for what felt like hours and hours and hours.
God,
and I just sort of leaned forward and just said, "Oh, just shut up." In the middle of the theater.
Oh my God, it's one of the worst scenes of the decade, just period.
Yeah,
oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't digress. That's kind of the point. At Long Last Love, ultimately, whereas Jacques Demy romanced sort of normal everyday life, that's what he thought needed to sort of be built up and treated as a glorious musical melodrama. Whereas Damien Chazelle, just to continue the thread, had that thought about struggling artists, and I totally get romanticizing that. I think one of Peter Bogdanovich's many mistakes in this was he romanticized the out-of-touch, bored rich. And even in those movies that he's talking about, that he loves so much, and that are still mostly really good movies like Top Hat, they were taking the piss out of the rich. A lot of them were. They came out in the Great Depression. And a lot of those musicals at the time were worked on two different levels. One, it's the fantasy of being that affluent. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, especially when everybody's impoverished, you go to the movies. You can dream about wearing the tuxedo and going to the fancy hotels.
Yeah, that's nice. And also, the other level in which it works, aren't they all idiots?
They made fun of what buffoons they all were.
Yeah, the fact that they have this little to do and this much going on in their lives actually makes them kind of pathetic. And that's the humor as well. And the reason why the ones that last work is because people like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and anyone else who made them well, they made you like the characters enough that their story, much like the story in something like The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, that's their story. These are their problems. And you like them enough that you start caring about their problems as though they're your friends. I don't like the people in At Long Last Love. They're self-absorbed. They're vapid. They have nothing going on in their lives. Even though they're actors, I really, really like. Again, I'm not terribly familiar with Giulio Del Prete, but everyone else is super likable. Like, Burt Reynolds is a likable movie star.
Yeah.
Sybil Shepherd is a very likable movie star. Madeline Kahn is one of the most likable movie stars ever.
Madeline Kahn and Eileen Brennan are so great.
John Hillerman is... I'm actually not super familiar with his work, but he's really funny in this.
I wonder if Madeline Kahn and Eileen Brennan met on the set of Clue just to sort of, like, commiserate occasionally.
Oh, I'll bet they had...
Let's get some cognac and tell Burt Reynolds stories.
I'll bet they had stories. Apparently he didn't want it. He didn't want Burt Reynolds. He wanted Elliot Gould, who was the biggest movie star in the world at the time, and apparently did have some song and dance experience.
I don't think that would have helped. Not with the way the film was shot.
Because
it was...
Burt Reynolds adds some charm to it, but like he doesn't add any music.
Well, nobody adds any music, and some of these people are like trained professionals. They can sing and dance. Madeline Kahn can sing and dance.
Yeah.
And yet... Peter Bogdanovich is trying to make it seem a little too natural for its own good. Now, this can work occasionally. I always hate to bring him up now, but one of Woody Allen's films, Everyone Says I Love You, takes that approach. It has all of these characters, whether or not they're professional singers and dancers or not. He has them all just sort of sing on the set and sound kind of normal, and that kind of adds a little bit of naturalist charm to that sort of musical because it's everything sort of evenly bustling in a movie like that. When you're dealing with that sort of heightened Irving Berlin, old George Stevens, Astaire and Rogers type musical, where everything's sort of glitzy and unreal, you need glitzy and unreal music. You need the film to stop for the songs. You can't just sort of fold it together.
And even if you do that, the choreography needs to be great.
The choreography and the singing and the attention to details in the music needs to be great, which is another way we can draw a parallel to La La Land, because the one main bugaboo with La La Land is that those are not professional singers and dancers. However well written the songs might be, you really need like some bold voice Broadway babies to bring a lot of actual musical song and dance talent to those roles. And God bless them, Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone don't have that.
Like the opening number, there's a lot of talented singers and dancers in that, and that's a great number. That big party number, Damien Chazelle films the hell out of that. The guy like falling into the pool and everything like that. All of that shit's really, really cool. But when you look at that big number everyone points to with Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone, and they're against the LA skyline, they're acquitting themselves okay. But what's really weird to me is when you look at something like At Long Last Love, and then 4 decades later, La La Land, just how much our collective standards for singing and dancing has fallen a bit, because ultimately the dancing that they're doing in La La Land, that everyone says, oh my god, they did their own singing and dancing, look at how good they are, is more or less at the same level as the singers and dancers, the non-professional singers and dancers in At Long Last Love, who everyone said were so fucking terrible, this movie is an embarrassment. And it's basically the same level of talent, because Sybil Shepherd can dance. She shouldn't probably do it professionally, but like she can dance, and she looks reasonably, like she can act while doing it. Burt Reynolds can look like he's dancing. And Madeline Kahn can dance
through clever editing.
And Madeline Kahn can dance, but she's actually the choreography. I think what happened was
they tried to scale her back a bit.
I think they scaled it back. I think they scaled the choreography down to the lowest common denominator. I think I heard that Burt Reynolds was considered the worst dancer in the group. I totally buy it. It's not really his wheelhouse. You have to sort of make it so that he can do it. And so everyone has to scale down.
Everybody has to be choreographed to him.
I was at a like a symposium or something for like a whole bunch of Oscar-nominated editors. Yeah, I told you the story before, but like one of the editors, it was the editor of Chicago, was there, and he was talking about how people talk about how choppily edited Chicago was, and he said, "Listen, we had to edit around Richard Gere. Richard Gere is not a professional dancer, so I had to start with his scene and try to make that look as impressive as I possibly could,
and then alter the editing and the rest of the movie to match that.
Set the editing rhythm for the entire movie, even though a lot of the other actors could dance better than that.
I think, you look at Chicago, you look at La La Land, you look at Long Last Love, and you get this pervasive feeling that Hollywood just doesn't understand musicals anymore. There was a time when they could do it, back in the 30s, but the
40s and 50s and 60s. Well, yeah, okay, good ones,
I guess West Side Story, Sound of Music. Yeah, they kept on going on, but there's at some point we just sort of lost this ability to understand what a musical is supposed to be about. And everybody says, I'm going to make a musical. Oh, is it going to be glitzy? Well, first of all, no, not all musicals are glitzy. Very few of them are glitzy. That's not an adjective we need to rely on, but it's the one we kind of fall back on. And making an actor doing their own singing and dancing in today's marketplace is seen as an impressive enough feat that people are going to praise it, whether or not it's good or bad.
Or at least as good as, listen, look at any Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers routine. Holy shit.
First of all,
you can find me two good actors who can do that now. You got yourself a musical. Well, but most people aren't at that level.
Which is why you go to something like Step Up 3D, where we actually have professional dancers who are funny and charming, and those are exciting movies to watch because the dancing is so damn good.
Yeah.
You go to something like La La Land, look, the actors learned the step. Well, yeah, they learned steps.
And they're okay.
But what are we saying with the music? What are you communicating with the dancing? You understand that when we film a dance, what we're looking at is something that can't be faked. This is something that we're going to a movie to see real professionals do very well. I don't care if somebody learned how to do steps and can kind of pass and fold it into a story. That's not why I go to see a musical. There's this very immediate form of entertainment in a musical that Hollywood doesn't understand.
And apparently
it's the same thrill that you get when you see something on Broadway. Somebody is on stage actually doing a real dance, actually singing a real song with their own motor, with their own motivation, with their own locomotion. This is not. I don't go to see necessarily a clever use of a song that is performed badly. I just want to see a good song performed well. That is going to be better than cleverly incorporating it into a story. Just give me great songs performed well, and I'm going to be taken away. Hollywood doesn't understand that.
But Jacques Demy did.
Jacques Demy certainly did.
And it's weird that Peter Bogdanovich
he's the one who's he's kind of sending it up, but he's using it, all of that professionalism and all that really... he's legitimately giving us good music, good performances, and great photography to communicate that.
And it's really ironic to me that Peter Bogdanovich was so, kind of off the mark. And even Peter Bogdanovich just said, looking back on it, I wasn't entirely sure what I was trying to accomplish, and I realize now what I was trying to do was make a movie about people who wanted to say things to each other but didn't know how, and so they used music. And he said he didn't feel like he made that movie very well, and I think that's fair, and I appreciate that level of self-reflection. But At Long Last Love does not fucking work, and I realized that it's one of those quote-unquote bad movies that was legendary for a long time, and then just people stopped talking about it, and it's not discussed. But much like Orca, which we discussed not that long ago, if you're talking about bad movies and you're not talking about At Long Last Love and Orca, you need to do more research because they're fucking terrible. But anyway. I digress.
No, you don't. You were just straight to the point. Fucking terrible. Let's read a couple letters.
We have an email account, criticallyacclaimedfans@gmail.com. You can write in, ask us questions, send us comments. Do you virulently disagree with us? Let us know.
I would love to hear if you know At Long Last Love, and I know it does have a couple defenders. I would love to hear from you because I don't know too many people who do defend it.
Yeah. not that it's like atrociously gross or offensive or anything. It's just bad. It's not good.
Yeah.
Next week, while Whitney queues up a letter, the next poll for Critically Acclaimed for the month of April, where you get to pick a good movie, we have just realized we haven't really covered any animation to speak of.
Yeah.
Not in our double feature anyway, and we realized that we should. So we are going to give you an option of some of the best, most important, greatest animated movies ever made. There are way too many to choose from. Narrowing it down to 5 was hard.
And I think we narrowed it down to kind of a weird 5, but that's fine. We like weird. We're into weird.
So these are your options. You're going to go to the Schmoeville Facebook page. The poll should be available now. And you just vote for the film you want us to review, and we will review it, and we'll pair it with a piece of crap. Your options are the anime classic Akira.
Arguably the most important anime film in America.
Yep. The stop-motion animated modern classic Coraline. The very strange French sci-fi film Fantastic Planet.
Please vote for Fantastic Planet. It's so friggin' good.
Fantastic Planet's really, really good. I'd love to talk about it. Hayao Miyazaki's beloved My Neighbor Totoro.
It's got a big raccoon monster.
And we knew we needed to put Disney on here somewhere, so we started at the beginning with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
We could have gone really mainstream, Lion Kings and Aladdins and all the rest.
Secret of NIMH.
But we wanted a diverse collection.
As diverse as we could get it, anyway.
I regret that we couldn't put Watership Down on there.
I just realized we didn't put any CG animated films on there either.
Yeah.
Well, whatever. There's too many to choose from. Whatever we picked, there would be great things that got left out, and that doesn't mean we'll never talk about them. This is just the poll, so you can go vote on that right now, and we'll review the winner next week. Now let's read a letter.
Here is a letter from R. Clay Johnson. He signs his full name. Hey guys, I'm really enjoying the new podcast. I first discovered you guys on Canceled Too Soon. That's our other podcast. And had just started listening to the B Movies podcast when it was canceled.
Yeah,
oh, sorry about that.
That was too soon.
Yeah. We had a long-running B Movies movies podcast called the B Movies Podcast, and it was yanked out from under us by corporate overlords. I'm so happy you're finally getting your movie advice once again. It's a nice companion on my long Sunday evening drives home. I also have to say I recently started watching the movie Trivia Schmoedown. 80s All Over is another one of my favorite podcasts. So when I heard Bibbs had a match against Drew McWeeny, I had to check it out. So thanks for that.
Yeah, sorry I lost.
I really enjoyed your recent breakdown of the Herbie franchise. When I first heard you were reviewing it, I was afraid you were just going to tear apart the silliness of those films, but was pleased to discover that you seem to have as much affection for them as I do. They're not bad movies.
Yeah, most of them are fine.
One of them's kind of bad, but yeah.
Yeah, like Herbie Goes Bananas ain't good, but like, they're all cute, harmless little movies for the most part.
He says, I was obsessed with the films as a child, so much so that I named several things Herbie after the love bug himself, including a bike, a pet rock, and even my mother's dog. Did you rename your mother's dog? Was it named something else and you started calling it Herbie, or did you get to choose the name?
Amazing.
Also, you had a pet rock? If you still have it, it might be worth something.
It might actually just be a rock.
Well, maybe so.
Like, you don't need to buy a pet rock. You can just get a rock.
Well, you could, but in the 70s, you could buy pet rocks. There were rocks with little googly eyes glued to them, and you paid money. It was a rock. That's it. You can find a niche and fill it, I suppose. I have to say, though, I never encountered the TV movie with Horace the Hate Bug. I might have to check that out sometime. It's a little hard to find, but it's out there in the world.
Yeah, I think it might be on one of the streaming services, like Amazon Prime or something. I think you can get it. I think you can get it.
Yeah, we watched it on my old VHS that I culled from somewhere.
It's good stuff.
I would like to suggest for a bad movie option, Tom Arnold's The Stupids. While I was fully aware of how bad this film was, even as a 14-year-old boy, I have fond memories of quoting certain lines with friends. Now that's a well-made shoe, for instance. I haven't seen The Stupids. I don't know.
I only ever saw the trailer. It looked like my kind of comedy, but I never actually sat down and watched it.
I read the children's books on which it is based, so I was kind of tempted to go. And some scenes, or rather the memory of them, still make me laugh. I also have a morbid curiosity of how painful this film may be to someone without positive memories attached, so I hope you get to review that one at some point. Clay. Well, thank you, Clay, for writing in. I guess we'll put the Stupids on there at some point. Why not?
Yeah.
I can't attest for how bad it is. I just remember the bad reviews it got.
Again, when we do our list of bad films, we put bad in quotation marks. They are allegedly...
They're more notorious than anything.
Notorious. We've defended the films that you guys voted for as bad movies. Like John Carter. I like John Carter. I think John Carter's pretty good. What was the other one? We did another one that we both really liked. We did Van Helsing, which I kind of liked.
We did Super Mario Brothers, which I like.
I find it entertaining in its way.
I'm one of the few people who just likes it unironically.
Here's one letter from Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Yo. Has being on the Schmoedown changed the way you watch movies? Have you gone back to study movie trivia due to the show? E.g., looking at the filmography of various people, making mental notes when seeing an actor on screen. Keep up the good work, Chris. Yes and no. If I have... After my match against, I think it was JTE, when I really just crashed and burned in the scores and soundtracks category, I paid more attention to scores and soundtracks than I perhaps had before. I realized that when I was memorizing director names and screenwriter names and actor names, I probably wasn't paying as close attention to all the composers in the world as I had been, and I realized I should probably give myself like a bit of a refresher course. So,
what did Marco Beltrami compose?
Yeah, that kind of thing. Mostly, I looked at honestly the Oscar nominees for I just looked at every Oscar nominated score for at least back to the 60s. I'm not saying I memorized them, but I gave them a really good look, and I thought about who did what, and that helped. And I've been paying a little closer attention to that lately. Yeah. So that's something. It doesn't change the way I review movies, but I know it might come up, so I'm paying a little closer attention.
I found that when I was younger, like around 18 to 25, I was really obsessed with amassing that type of trivia in my brain. And I was really sort of categorizing things and making lists in my head and trying to keep really close track of everything that was going on. Mm-hmm. And I started to delve into older movies at that point, like at the end of this period. And I started watching more films in theaters, and I started writing about them a little bit more seriously. And I realized that gland for just that all the trivia was stuck to was just starting to wither after a while, because I was focusing more on finding films that I thought to be really great and spreading the word on great films rather than just amassing all film trivia. So for a long time, I just sucked at film trivia. Like, you catch me at age 21 and I'm really good at film trivia. Catch me at age 31 and I stink. So I've been trying to build that up again and pay closer attention and trying to really keep those connections alive. There's a time when I was really great at the Kevin Bacon game, for instance, and now I'm just not anymore. But yeah, being on the Schmoedown really has sort of helped me build that up again. Here, can I read another letter?
Please read another letter.
All right, here's a letter from Cecil. Hi, Cecil. Hey, guys. So Oliver is a fun movie about kids pickpocketing, and it has music, and it keeps it mainly upbeat since the main villain, Bill, comes into it. Bill Sykes murders and assaults and kidnaps. It also has child abuse and all manner of horrible things, and it barely pretends that these things aren't the worst. So my question is, why is this film rated G?
Oh, that's a good question. Oliver, I think it predates the rating system, or it came out around the same time the rating system existed. For many, 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 many years, the rating system as we know it today in America, G, PG, eventually they added PG-13 and R.
When it started, it was G, GP, R, and X. Those were the 4 ratings.
But basically, there was suitable for everyone, suitable for most people, but parents should probably be worried about it. Think about what they're showing their kids. Probably only suitable for adults, but maybe kids can handle it if their parents were with them.
Yeah.
And then definitely only suitable for adults, even if you have a kid with you, you should not. That rating immediately got co-opted by pornography. There are a few major motion pictures from the dawn of the rating system, like A Clockwork Orange, directed by Stanley Kubrick, or Midnight Cowboy, which won Best Picture, that were rated X. But once porn just became synonymous with X, a lot of newspapers wouldn't advertise an X-rated movie, and that rating became unviable. But that's a different story. Before that, after the early 1930s, every movie released in America, at least through a major studio, went through what was called the Hays Code or the Production Code. And that was an incredibly rigid set of guidelines about what could or could not be in a movie, because they had to be suitable for everybody. So whether you were making a horror movie or a family movie, you had to follow the same rules.
Go through the Hays Code. And that's why you hear people talking about pre-code musicals, and you look at a pre-code film, and they're usually a little racier.
Yeah,
they're never
more sexy.
They're never outright pornographic, but there might be some nudity. There might be a few naughty words or naughty jokes, just references to sex.
Yeah. You see people actually there were actually storylines about sex, and then after Production Code that went way away. But it came down to things like you can't have someone do something bad in a movie and not get their comeuppance.
Yeah,
which is really limiting the kind of stories you can tell. And it's amazing how many brilliant motion pictures worked within such a confining environment.
Here's a great story about that. They had a similar code in South America, throughout the South American countries, where Coffin Joe comes from. If you don't know Coffin Joe, he is a Brazilian horror host / character. He wore a top hat. He looked like an undertaker, and he starred in a series of films where he just did really, really horrible things in order to prove that he would never get any sort of cosmic comeuppance. He would just break as many rules as he possibly could just to spite God and spite the world. And they'd have films where it's like he'd torture people to death and then he'd eat them, and that's the end of the movie. And the production code in Brazil pointed out that he needs to be punished for this somehow, and Coffin Joe would come back and say, no, that's kind of the point. He doesn't get punished. That's the theme of my movie, that he's not going to get punished for all these evil deeds. And there's a really great one where he tortures a couple to death, and the final scene is him and all of his cronies sitting around a table eating their body parts. It's this really horrific horror movie. And the production code, instead of cutting that scene, like went to the film and they, using like a pin, scratched onto the film strip itself little lightning bolts coming out of the sky and striking his body and scratching it out. And then they tacked on this little thing saying, and looks like God punished him after all, huh? It's like they electrified him using the cheapest possible effect.
Ridiculous. Anyway, the reason why I bring up all this context is the rating system as we know it, I believe debuted in 1968. Oliver came out in 1968. Standards were being figured out, and Oliver was probably produced in an environment in which it had to meet the approval of a sort of a production code, or at the very least would be expected to fall under that scrutiny if necessary. So even though it has very heavy topics, Dickensian topics, they're handled in such a way that they're not overt. There's not a lot of on-screen violence. And then it came out, and they decided it was a G rating, probably because it would have passed muster 6 months ago. And then standards evolved and changed over time. And
now we don't really have a G rating anymore, even for animated films. What was the last G rated film you remember seeing?
I don't know. It's probably an animated film. I don't remember it offhand. But actually, and funnily enough, Oliver is apparently the only film to be released with a G rating to win Best Picture.
Really?
Yeah, other films were like re-rated G, but like to come out with a G rating, Oliver.
Wow.
Oliver's the only one. It was the first year. So yeah, again, just standards change, expectations change. A lot of movies that were rated PG when they first came out would now be a PG-13 or an R.
Like Gremlins, for instance.
Yeah, I want to say like Texas Chainsaw was a PG when it came out, wasn't it? Am I wrong?
Texas Chainsaw was an X-rated film.
Was it X?
It got an X-rated.
But I'm wrong. I'm just really wrong. There was some horror movie that got a PG when it came out, and it wouldn't today. I don't remember what it was. Anyway.
The rating system is kind of meaningless anyway.
Yeah, it's a general guideline, and we take it too seriously.
We do give it far too much muster, and
it's just supposed to give parents a vague heads up about how grim or how violent or how sexual or how controversial the material might be. And that's all it's supposed to be.
And while there are certain guidelines, like actually written guidelines, like about how many times you can use the F word or what sex acts are allowed in a movie,
it's very subjective.
It's very subjective, and indeed the MPAA, they've been very coy about this, but it tends to factor into just the mood. Like, what mood is the film in? Is it sort of bright? Can you kind of skim over some of these harsh things? Then it gets a lower rating. Kirby Dick made a really great documentary film called This Film Is Not Yet Rated, all about sort of how the MPAA operates and how they've been harming artists for decades.
And how the MPAA operates is actually very secretive.
Yeah.
And some of the things they discovered are not cool. I mean, it's not like horrifying per se, but like you just watch it and just like there is no set standard, and a lot of the things they say they're supposed to do they don't actually do. So again, don't take it too seriously regardless, but that's probably the reason why Oliver has a G, is because it came out right at the dawn of the medium. I suspect if it had come out 5 years later, it probably would have gotten a PG. Come out today, probably would have been a PG-13 just because of how intense it gets. But yeah.
Okay. Here's a letter from Hayden. He writes his own strange double feature that he constructed himself. Hello. Over the weekend, I did a double feature of Freddy Got Fingered and The Brown Bunny. Wow, that's a rough one. There's a good chance you might not read this, but I'm going to tell you about the double feature. We're reading it anyway. First, I watched Freddy Got Fingered, and I didn't think it was as bad as its reputation. Don't get me wrong, it's a terrible movie, often very unfunny, but it's nowhere near something like Movie 43. The movie also has one or two pretty decent comedy bits, which is more than I can say for the comedies like it. After that, I watched The Brown Bunny, which I think should qualify for pornography. Not for the scene, but because it's essentially 90 minutes of Vincent Gallo pleasuring his ego.
Well, yeah.
That's Vincent Gallo's life. pretty much.
Yeah.
I think I've never hated watching a movie more than this. Its overall sense of forced importance to the unearthed and unnecessary oral sex scene, to the twist so bad and unnecessary that M. Night Shyamalan would groan, to just being flat out bored for its entirety. I hated it and would have inflicted it on even my worst enemies. What are your thoughts on movies mentioned? What is your strangest double feature? That's a good double feature, I guess. Freddy Got Fingered is writing this really weird line between really horrible gross out comedy and perhaps unintentionally clever satire of said gross out comedies. And I've heard arguments to both, and I'm convinced by arguments to both. When I first saw it in theaters, it was execrable. I just did not want anything to do with that movie. But then people started pointing out that he talks about the waste of money that this movie is throughout the course of the movie, and just what an absurd practice it would be to give Tom Green a film. And he's going to go out of his way to make it as repellent as possible, and how there's kind of an integrity to that, especially from within the studio system. How does that pair with the Brown Bunny?
They're both indulgent.
They're both sort of artists indulging in kind of their own egotistical view of the way movies ought to operate.
And if the audience likes it, it's kind of incidental, man.
Yeah, I heard horror stories about the Brown Bunny. I watched the Brown Bunny. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Well, apparently the version they showed at Cannes was significantly longer.
Yeah.
And even in the version that exists, it's mostly Vincent Gallo driving around the desert doing nothing.
And feeling sorry for himself.
Mm-hmm. There's a scene where he just gets on a motorcycle, rides off into the desert in the background for like a couple of minutes, and then rides back, and then walks out of the frame. And it serves no fucking function. I don't care what he thinks that's doing. That's just tedium.
I heard that in the Cannes version, he drives away and he vanishes. We don't see him, and then we hold on that shot, and then we see him drive all the way back.
Well, we do, but I think
in the final cut, we don't see him driving back. He just sort of drives off and vanishes, and that's more of a potent symbol, I'd say, that he just disappears.
Oh, I think you're right. I think I'm remembering that wrong.
But yeah, he stops and he meets women, and they're all named after flowers, and they all fall in love with him, and he says, "I can't be with you. I'm a tragic, Byronic asshole." It's like, well, so you are. Go be a tragic, Byronic asshole. You are such a great artist, Vincent Gallo. Oh, by the way, have you seen my penis? Look. And it's like, jeez, we don't need that.
Vincent, no.
No.
Stop it. Stop it, Vincent.
But this is also the same guy who sold merchandise on his website, including his own sperm.
Yeah,
you remember that?
You know what? We're done talking about Vincent Gallo.
All right. We don't have to talk Vincent Gallo. You want to read another letter?
That just fuels his ego. We don't need it anymore. It's an interesting double feature you found there, and I kind of see how it works. We'll do one more quick letter.
Okay. Let me find a good one. This one comes from Lady Knight the Brave.
Okay.
Hey, Lady Knight. She's written in before.
Yep.
Hi, Bibbs and Whitney. Hello, you guys. I very much enjoyed your Spice World and Dirty Dancing Havana Nights episode of Critically Acclaimed. Dirty Dancing Havana Nights is delightful for me in large part because I like Diego Luna.
Who doesn't?
And he was clearly doing his best with a terrible script. And the dancing stuff was fun, even though the movie is rock stupid. I just like Spice World for no good reason, except I was the right age for it when it came out, and both my sisters and several cousins were also big fans of the band. It's extremely stupid, and I once recorded a commentary track for it with a friend of mine. I tried to do a podcast for a hot second, and then got too busy to keep it up or get good at podcasting. It was mostly just us singing along with the songs and observing the absurd number of cameos from very talented actors slumming it in this movie, and their double-decker bus is a TARDIS. Because it's bigger on the inside.
That's true.
And also, we waxed philosophical about how the elements of a movie age poorly, and we're pretty sure that the Spice Girls don't actually understand the concept of girl power. They just liked saying it a lot. Anyway, this email is just a bunch of thoughts from a bunch of episodes, so here's another one. Bibbs, I hope by the time you've read this, you got to see A Wrinkle in Time and or Mute.
Neither.
I would love to hear your thoughts if they haven't already been expressed on the podcast.
Sorry, yeah, it's only gone around.
I know Witney hated both movies, and I get it with Mute, although I found things to like in that movie. A lot of it was, however, bad. I enjoyed one scene that connected to Moon. He'd been working on Mute for years as a spiritual sequel to Moon, and the connective tissue between the two is really blink and you miss it. Also, I'm just a sucker for bad boys, but I liked Alexander Skarsgård in the movie. Maybe his detective work is shoddy, but for whatever reason, I found his expressiveness really endearing. I also see a lot to like in A Wrinkle in Time as kind of a cheesy, trashy YA entertainment that is made for children. There are a lot of echoes of the never-ending story in that movie. I mean, my biggest issue is the use of pop music throughout, ? It took me out of a lot of scenes, which could have been better. Everything else in the movie, I think, pretty much works. There's 10 highly charged emotional scenes back to back, however, and I think Chris Pine spends 50% of his screen time crying. That part I think of as one of the movie's strengths, actually, although it might be just based on the cultural baggage of a more hypermasculine role that Chris Pine has typically been seen playing. She also talks about some other movies like The Cured.
I didn't see that.
I'm
sorry.
What were your thoughts? You didn't get to see him yet?
I didn't get to see him. I feel bad.
Yeah, the more I think about A Wrinkle in Time, the more I realize it just doesn't work. And this is less to do with sort of my fondness of the book, memories that I had growing up, and realizing that the filmmaking is really just kind of sloppy. Ava DuVernay, she's a very talented person. She's very well spoken, but she wasn't able to...
She's made 2 great movies at least.
She wasn't able to sort of take that sort of fantasy thing and put it into much of a more, I guess, traditional, I don't know, just something that feels really workable, feels like it has awe in it. And that's something that is stated in dialogue but is not felt in the movie. I know I'm kind of on the low end of the spectrum of A Wrinkle in Time. I know a lot of people really liked it.
I think it's kind of half and half. Like, I think people love it, and a lot of people will go like, don't think it worked. I think that's fair. Again, I haven't, at least it's in terms of a scale. I haven't seen it. I still want to see it. I'm bummed I haven't seen it. And I'm going to, and I vow, because you're not the only person who said this. When I see A Wrinkle in Time, whenever it comes out on home video, I will talk about it on the podcast.
Okay.
You're not the only one to ask. I might not get to mute anytime soon. But Wrinkle in Time, I'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's our show, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, don't forget, you can write in critically acclaimed fans at gmail.com. We do not have time to read every letter, but we read as many as we can. And next week, we're going to be reviewing the new releases. What do we got going on for next week? I Feel Pretty. Super Troopers 2.
Yeah.
Traffic. Traffic, I guess. Spelled with a K.
Traffic with a K. To distinguish it from that other movie, Traffic.
Which was based on a movie called
Traffic with a K.
I thought literally that they were doing another remake of Traffic. I was really confused. That's not what it is at all. We're going to review at least some of those. I'm not sure which ones yet, but some or all.
Isn't the new Avengers film coming out next week?
Week after that.
Week after that.
We have time.
We'll talk about that one too, I guess.
Eventually. So we got that coming up. We will review Double Feature of your choice. Don't forget to go to the Schmoeville! Fan page on Facebook to vote for that. It'll be an animated film. We'll pair it with another film. And it'll be nice.
It'll be great.
And I'm still tired from the free-for-all, so we're going to wrap it up. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at William Bibbiani.
I am at Witney Seibold.
Don't forget, we have another podcast, Canceled Too Soon, in which we review TV shows that lasted only one season or less. This week we were reviewing the John Woo pilot for Lost in Space, which no one saw, but was actually kind of neat. And if you're enjoying the new Netflix series, you might want to know that the director of Face Off did it too. So that's available. It's not on the Schmoes No Network. It's on a separate thing. So thank you, everybody, for listening. And never forget, everyone's a critic.
I want to go to the midnight show. I'm sorry, what?